pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any additions we need for the agenda tonight?
Yes, announcements.
I just put it under the next public comment and announcements by the board.
Which way
It
do you
just
want
saved the line.
I have a point of information about that. Since we've been having an ongoing debate about the agenda and so forth, I just wanted to put a quote from volume 63 of McKinney's Consolidated Laws of New York, annotated under section 4-400 of the village law. It's an opinion of the state comptroller, 81-417, and it reads: the agenda or order of business at a Board of Trustees meeting, being procedural in nature, is controlled by the Board of Trustees, and the mayor has no authority to keep an item off the agenda or prevent its discussion at a board meeting unless the trustees have granted him such authority via their procedural rules. So I just would like to put that on the record. And there's two, that's yours. And there's another memo about the Board of Trustees here too, which people can look at it there.
Is there a reason you waited until the meeting to say that, rather than?
I'm saying it because it's under the agenda, and I looked it up, and now I have the information, so I'm sharing it.
He's responding to that.
Well, I think he can speak for himself, actually. I hope so, anyway. Well, thank you for springing that on me, at least, so I appreciate the lack of courtesy.
Okay, anytime.
Is there anything actually to be added to the agenda? No? All right, public comment? Is anyone here to speak about something? Butch,
Sorry,
yeah?
didn't you have agenda items? Didn't you have agenda items?
Well, that's,
I just asked if there's anything else to be added to the agenda.
yeah, but we are having an executive session, right?
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
that's next down. That's on, that we have it for interviews. And for whatever else we
But I
need.
mean, can we have a second one if we need it?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course. Yeah. No, that we can enter into at any time.
Okay.
Butch, sorry.
Am I allowed two topics?
Sure.
The first one is a general comment is that this Saturday night, there will be a music benefit to help the music program at the school and other programs, but my concern is music. We're gonna help the kids. The kids are gonna play, the jazz band is gonna play Steely Dan, which most people wouldn't dare to attempt, so that's worth the price of admission. Middle school, that's right, kids. The high school rock band will rock us, and then local stars, the Traps and the Clementines, and out of the goodness of their heart, and thank God there was no ramble, Larry Campbell and Teresa Williams, Levon's, the soul of Levon's band, 3 Grammy Award winning producer will be the headliner. It's cheap. You ain't gonna have to pay $150 like the Ramble. You can see Larry and Teresa for $10 or $15. So come to the Studley Theater, help the kids, because music is the true healer, and the kids are our future. So thank you for that. I hope to see you all. And on a more somber note, in the paper, Trustee Vasco was quoted, and I'd like to be here to remind her. I know she's young, and she needs a little seasoning and education, but words hurt, words affect people. The village of New Paltz was founded by people fleeing religious persecution. Today is the 7th anniversary of my transplant. It's also the Hanukkah holiday, which celebrates the Feast of Lights and the celebration of miracles. There are people in this community that attend churches and synagogues and other houses of worship, and they are people. They are not just houses of worship, not-for-profits, however you want to phrase it. These are the people of this community who work hard, who build the community, who take care of our children, and we worship. I don't worship here in this town because I'm really a lot more conservative in this town. So I go to Kingston with the Orthodox. But, with all due respect, Rabbi Coxamea.
Wow. Wow. Have you no shame?
I'm in the village board meeting, Hector. Come on.
Point taken.
I'd like to remind you that there are people here like myself, 43 years, who find it offensive to have to stop for people who don't like that I drive a sports car and make me stop when there's cars going, and they look at me and they cross the street to make me stop. You're concerned about pedestrians and bicycles, that's fine. But this is the real world. People worship, people have the right to worship, and if they can't walk there, they should be allowed to drive there and park there. So please, take it under advisement. Your words hurt a lot of people.
I thank you for that, and I want to say that I apologize. And it wasn't really exactly what I had said, and it wasn't meant to be a one versus the other. I guess my mindset was coming from an environmental standpoint and not about some people versus other people. But I sincerely, I appreciate the text you sent me too, asking me if the paper had quoted me correctly. I guess I meant it more as a, where do you draw the line when you are, catering to any group of people, as you go. But I do appreciate that, and I totally hear what you're saying, and I really do apologize. And I'm sure there are going to be others who speak to the same thing, so bring it on. I'm sorry.
Mark, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. I'm Ellen Butowska. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Trustees for the Jewish Congregation of New Paltz. And I applaud this board for wanting to create a more pedestrian-friendly, walkable village and to manage the parking situation. I think that's really great. I also think you're a board that, from what I can tell, has prided itself on its openness and inclusiveness, and the Church Street issue just really hasn't felt that way, recognizing that it's not law yet, but still, you developed a plan for Church Street without ever speaking to the main stakeholders. I will echo what was just said, because the quote that you're not of a mind to cater to churches and synagogues felt really dismissive. Churches and synagogues are not a special interest group from outside of the community. Those filling our communities, churches and synagogues are the people who live and work and vote here. So surprisingly and kind of confusingly, nobody attempted to speak to any of us about any of this. And even in a phone call several days before the November meeting, we were told not to come and speak about our concerns because nothing was happening about the parking plan, only to discover that it had already been approved. So that was very confusing. So you may not know our reality at the synagogue, and I know there's others, I think there may be others from Church Street here, because you haven't asked. For example, we fundraised thousands of dollars to make our synagogue handicapped accessible, and we recently installed a lift to get handicapped and elderly up our stairs. That's how much accessibility to our front door is an issue for us. So if this plan were to go through, just for starters, we would want to know how the bump out will look and work. Would it be a back end? Would it be a wide turn? How far would it be from our front door? And very importantly, would activities in this proposed park respect the weekly religious events that we have at our synagogue? So the stakeholders of Church Street really need more information than the plan gives at this point, and we really deserve to be partners in this process. So thank you.
I was going to do this as an announcement, but maybe this will clarify. I'm sorry I wasn't at the last meeting. I was in South Africa, having a wonderful time. I think there has been a misunderstanding.
There's music.
What we developed was a parking plan to introduce to the village board to see if they conceptually approved of the ideas. It's differentiated between immediate 2013 budget, long term. Now the bump out plan is a budgetary item, so that isn't even in the thinking at the moment. What immediate means is those things that do not have budgetary implications that we can alter the village law to, such as alternative street parking, but all of that requires now amending the village law, and that means hearings on what we're proposing, to which you are all invited. The bump out is a budgetary thing, and that will be talked about with Rabbi Phil and all of you, because that's really, hopefully, a way of closing off the upper part of Church Street, but giving the synagogue accessibility and handicapped accessibility. That was the intention of that. So I think there needed to be a clarification here of what this all means. Immediate The only thing that is really, truly immediate that can be done without changing ordinances and without public hearing was our recommendation, which was approved, to bag the meters for a certain period of time before the holidays as a convenience to all of us who shop downtown.
Which they are
And
bagged.
also to the merchants, and those have been bagged.
Mhm.
And we thank the highway department for doing that for us and for the parking department for doing. I hope this clarifies, because when I got home and read the paper, I thought, oh my, there is a major problem here and a major misunderstanding. So please know that when anything, and it won't be until next year because we have a lot on our plate, next year is coming fairly soon, but all of this must be reviewed with an attorney. It must come back to the board for approval, and then the board must call for a hearing, and there will, I hope, be ample notice. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to call me,
Yeah.
the village clerk, anybody.
And I also want to apologize for, you mentioned there was confusion. That was my fault also, because we hadn't had any minutes from the meeting where we had passed it, and we had such a short conversation that I said, there's no way we would have had such a short conversation about this. We must have not done it. And then I got the minutes literally the day after a meeting that Mark had been in, and I realized, oh gosh, I was completely wrong, and I sent out an email to the TIC about this, apologizing, and that I had just gotten the minutes, and I saw what was going on, and I realized where my confusion had been, so that was part of why I think there was a misunderstanding, but just for clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
I don't want to do any blatants. And actually, by the time we had our board meeting on Sunday night, we pretty much understood that we weren't in the middle of an immediate emergency and that this was something that was going to be debated later. But the apprising us in advance of any discussion regarding Church Street might have brought us to a point where it doesn't even have to come to that. Mm-hmm. In other words, we'd like to talk about the issue now so that by the time 2013 budgetary discussions come up, this might not even be an issue. All right. The board asked me to specifically say that we think that the part of this plan, which is on the bottom of 2 and on the top of 3, that deals with Church Street is detrimental to the congregation. And that we do want to be apprised of any further discussion that might have to do with the destiny of Church Street, I guess I could say. We actually already have some experience with what happens when precisely that part of Church Street is closed, because it has happened already on a couple of occasions. A few months ago, I'm not even sure when this is, could be a year ago, because I can't remember time that well. But I showed up to synagogue on a Friday evening, and that whole area of Church Street was barricaded off, and apparently some film company was filming something. We had no clue that this was going to happen. And I managed to find out that I was allowed to pass the barrier to get into the synagogue, but most of my congregants didn't end up getting that far, and so there were a grand total of 2 people sitting in the room. So that was not good. Wasn't last summer, I don't think, but I think before that. We had Church Street closed off on a few occasions for the farmers market, which I guess mostly is now held elsewhere, but it was on precisely that part of Church Street between Main and Academy. And it was closed off again for traffic, and this was precisely during Saturday morning services. And again, we had no notice of that. So the concept of apprising us in advance of anything that has to do with Church Street is very important, and keeping in mind that we have services at times that need to be recognized, particularly Friday night and Saturday mornings, but also Jewish holidays as they arise. And people aren't always aware of all of the Jewish holidays, and most calendars say Rosh Hashanah on it, but a lot don't say much else. So if we're going to be dealing with access to the synagogue, everybody needs to be on the same page about that. As Ellen mentioned, we just invested $15,000 in handicap accessibility, and we are even now creating a deeper relationship with the Jewish residents in Woodland Pond, which means we're going to have even more need for the handicap accessibility than we already do. And if you've ever seen how long it takes for a person in a wheelchair or with crutches or with a walker to get out of a car and into the building, even when the car is parked directly in front of the door, you would realize that this whole drop-off concept cannot possibly work. We already have major congestion during many services with access from Main Street, with access from the municipal parking lot on the corner there, and it still can get extremely crowded. So I can't imagine what would happen if we didn't even have a thoroughfare that went past the synagogue. I think I'm going to just stop right there, just to reinforce the notion that the synagogue would rather not know so much the dimensions of the bump out rather than to say that the whole bump out concept and the closing of Church Street altogether is an idea that we're not fond of and think will be detrimental to the congregation. Thanks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Might I ask that either Ariana and I be invited to a board meeting or to a subcommittee meeting so we can talk about ideas and be able to have some collaboration?
Yeah, we would love to.
That would be very, very good.
Pardon me? Can I just
Yeah,
interject
please.
for a second? Rabbi, if you would be so kind as to forward me a list of the holy days, I'll put them on the calendar in my office, so that way if something comes up, I can come back to the board and go, they want to close Church Street, but it's the holy day here, so that everyone can make the most informed decision possible. I'd be happy to put it on the main calendar.
Thanks, Katie.
Good call.
Yes, sir, in the back? Yes.
I'm James DRC, and I'm also on the Board of Trustees, and I'm on the Social Justice Committee of the synagogue. My two concerns have to do with the whole idea of the park concept, which I don't think is a good idea to close off Church Street at all. First of all, I have many of our congregants are older, so they need to get right close to the front door. Like a bump out is really too far to have to walk. I mean, I help people in, and it's very difficult to even get from the front door up and inside. So to go further is a real hardship. There's only 3 handicap spots in the area. There's one on Church Street, and the other 2 are down in that parking lot, which is, I imagine, where the park would be. So those spots would disappear right down in the parking lot for Neko Sushi. I don't understand what the park is going to be. All I know is we're going to close off Church Street and put a park up there.
Well, we're not closing it off, we're proposing to, and really want to have a conversation.
Right, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm opposed to that, why I don't think it's a good idea. And the other reason is, we know that there's been problems with homeless youth at 60 Main Street and 58 Main Street, the area right across the street from where the park is going to be. And I know I'm friends with the owner of 58 Main Street, so I've been watching this go on for years. I know how he's had to deal with it. And it becomes the problem of the property owner. The property owner has to go to the police, the property owner has to file a complaint, the property owner has to show up in court. It's not a police thing, it's a property thing. And if we close off Main Street, you're gonna just move the homeless youth problem from one side of the street to our front door. And then we're gonna be the ones who have to do it. And I know one of the issues that Bobby Downs had was that there used to be an alley between 58 and 60 Main Streets. But the youth would go in there and they would defecate and urinate, and he had to actually build a barrier to keep that from happening. Now, we have an alley between our synagogue and the next building, but that's our emergency exit. If there's a fire, we need to get out there, so we don't have that. So if you put a park there, the nearest public bathroom is going to be our alley. So that's one of the things I think we need to consider about closing that area.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Amy Donnelly. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the synagogue. And I just have 2 points of information for you to take into consideration when you develop a plan. And I did understand that it was a draft, and thank you for reminding me. One is that a pedestrian park looks different after dark. And the services, many of them begin around sundown and let out later in the night. And so people, especially older people who don't always see so well in the dark, might not find the park to be aesthetically pleasing, they might find it to be threatening. The other thing is that people may think of a house of worship as sort of the church default. That is, a family comes in a car and they can drop off grandma near the front door, go and park and come back. But there are many, many people who attend services solo in the congregation. And if they're older or on crutches or just have trouble navigating the narrow and bumpy sidewalk, that would be an impossible situation if there were a drop-off place. That it's not the design of a turnaround or bump out, it's the fact of one. It doesn't do you any good if you're the only person coming to services in that car. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
I'm Mark Sherman. First of all, I just want to say as a general comment, and not to get in the midst of anything, because I just got the paper this evening. The reason I'm going to talk about consolidation for 1 second. The only reason I'm for that has nothing to do with money. It has to do with the fact that I've lived here for more than 40 years, and I lived in the village and in the town. And I think of myself as a New Paltz person, not a village resident, a town resident. And I just feel the creativity, the energy, the incredible intelligence, and everything that makes this town and village, this community, to use that term, a great place, is so much of it is wasted on all this stuff. I'm just saying, because I think we are great here, and I think we could be beyond great if we somehow got ourselves together. I just want to say that. However, it's not totally irrelevant to what I'm going to say next. Strangely enough, I do want to talk about the alternate side parking, which is not, has not really been discussed. And I have some concerns. This has come up before with previous boards, and I expressed some of my concerns right then. First of all, I am deeply concerned about the environment. I was a major Al Gore supporter in 2000. I spent more money for that campaign than I ever did for anybody up until a future presidential candidate who will remain nameless. No. But and I understand the environmental concerns. I do. I really do. And I'm desperately afraid. I have young grandchildren, and I'm literally beyond afraid of their future. So I understand with trying to cut down on motor vehicles and all that stuff. I get it. But we're a little town. I was just in San Francisco. My wife and I were just in San Francisco, and we didn't have a car. We walked. We walked, and we took the BART, and we took the trolley, because that's a city, and so it's made for people to walk or take public transportation. We don't have that. We have a loop bus, and that's about it. And if you live a few miles away and you come in to use the village retail places, whatever, it's a problem. About alternate side, there's one among problems. There's 3 streets in particular I'm particularly concerned about. They're Grove Street, they're North Oakwood, and North Manheim. Grove the most. I do know there are churches at those corners, and again, it's interesting that it's religious places that, not intentionally, I by no means think it's intentional. I'm sorry you were quoted that way, Ari. You couldn't have said exactly that, but whatever it is, okay. But as it happens, these churches serve more than just church functions. They also are community places, and in fact, one thing I know about the church on Grove Street, which is the United Methodist Church, is that it's frequently used by all kinds of groups, including groups like Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, groups where people may be really concerned, but are unlikely to show up because they're anonymous meetings. However, I can assure you that I know that there are a lot of people who attend them. They don't just come from the village of New Paltz. They don't just come from the town of New Paltz. They come from all over. This is perhaps one of the most vital things that goes on in this community. It's quiet, but its importance cannot be overestimated. This is vital. And from what I know about addiction, if you make things a little harder for potential people to enter recovery, they just won't bother. Mm-hmm. So a community should do everything in its power to try to make itself welcoming. The people who live there, the neighbors, I've never heard, I don't think people complain, whatever it is, it's such a vital thing. And there are other church functions too, and I think there are at St. Andrews. So it's a base for community. There's something about churches and synagogues. You don't have to be religious to appreciate them. They serve a community function that really is not, barely, people are welcomed. There's something about it, that's wonderful, and I think to dissuade people. And parking is just at a premium in the village.
Now, North Manheim is a slightly different situation, but there's people need to park there as well. And I am convinced that if alternate side parking is instituted in North Manheim, people will do what they always do when they're looking for a parking place. They'll find what they can. They'll find the bank parking lot and make it hard for the bank customers. They'll go to Shaper's parking lot and make it hard for Shaper's customers. They'll go to Dedrick's across the way. And so the people, those owners are gonna be saying, wait, where are all these people? And you can put up things saying, we'll tow you, whatever. And I don't think we really need that. So I just, I really have concerns. And I understand, when there's talk about walkable and bikeable, I'm all for that. And when I lived in the village, and I lived on Harrington Street, I was in my 30s. I'm 70 now, and I walk a lot. I don't bike, but I did. When I was in Harrington Street, I biked and walked all over the place. But I was in a different situation. I was near everything. I walked to my work at the college. Now I'm several miles away, and I'm closer than a lot of people. It's just unfeasible. So again, understanding the needs, and I respect them. I just feel this is in many ways a rural area, and people, and unfortunately with public transportation, I don't think we have the quantity of people that makes it feasible the way it does in San Francisco, New York, and should be Los Angeles. I don't know what the heck happened to them. But anyway, so I just want to, they ripped it up. Yeah, I just want to make the point for the the function of the community to really not try to limit parking, because I think it will have such a deleterious effect on people who come here for a wide variety of reasons, not only self-help, but also to patronize our local establishments. And there was something, I'll just finish with this. In the plan, if I can find my little quote here, when the Transportation Land Use Project, which made its report in 2006, and the Transportation Implementation Committee, if you can say all that quickly, was to try to fulfill that, and Ariana and I and Sally has been on that committee. That they concluded, it said in page 145 of their report, the project has analyzed parking demand within the village's core commercial area. There are over 300 on-street parking spaces within a 5-minute walk of the village's commercial core. It is important that this existing on-street inventory be available for all users for the foreseeable future. The project does not see the need to restrict on-street parking in New Paltz. And I haven't walked it, but I would think Grove Street and North Oakwood are probably, especially going downhill, probably a 5-minute walk. So I don't know if they included that, but it could be included. So anyway, I know this hasn't been put into effect yet, but I urge you to really think about this before it's instituted. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Please.
Hi, I'm Shelley Sherman. I'm going to talk more briefly than my husband. I'm also talking about the alternate side parking. And I feel like a little trivial because as compared to churches, synagogues, self-help meetings, I want to talk about going to the bakery and parking. But I just wanted to kind of share my own experience, and maybe it would be useful. Since I retired from my job about 4 years ago, practically every week I meet a friend at the bakery and we walk on the rail trail, usually for 4 miles. So we do walk, we know what walking is, but we park. It's gotten harder and harder to park. So we usually park on the second segment of Church Street, not where the synagogue is, but the next part. And we've been parking further and further and further, like close to where it comes out on Henry W. Du Bois Road. And I don't know if it's because more students have cars who live on the street, or more people come to the businesses and the library. But it's not terrible. I'm not complaining about it. But I could imagine a situation, if it was, I think you could only park on one side or the other, it would be totally filled up. And I don't know, I'm not here on behalf of David Santner by any means, or any of the other businesses. But I would think, Handmade and all those shops there, it might be of concern to them. But this is just my pragmatic experience. So think carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to be rude, but I already missed Springsteen, and I'm not going to miss the Stones. So thank you and good night.
Good to see you.
Enjoy.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.
Can I even toss something in there too?
You both had something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I spoke with, I was at the bakery actually very recently, and I spoke with a friend of mine who works there, and she said that there was a lot of concern from different business people, and I suggested that they can send us emails or or come
I got
together.
a message, I think, from the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and I said please come before the board and we can speak and we'll work it out one way or the other. So.
Yeah, I think also the bike ped as in general gave this its stamp of approval with a couple of caveats, but one of them being that there actually have been studies done that show that if you remove one side of the street parking, that cars will drive faster because there's more room, and that having cars on both sides of the street is actually safer for cyclists. And that was one of their big caveats as to why we should not do the alternate side of the street parking. And they also were very sympathetic to environmental things, and also understood that for snow removal, it would be a huge help. But they, asked that we weigh that in as well. So I thought I'd throw that out there with everybody else's.
As all things, when one lives in community, one has to weigh both sides.
Right.
And there are many residents who live on the streets that we're talking about who would like to see alternate street parking, as well as Ariana just said, snow removal. There are business people who, on the one hand, have asked for more parking, who have complained that there isn't enough parking, and now is saying, so, it's all to be weighed. I think the issue with the synagogue is a very different issue in that I agree with what Mark is saying about churches and synagogues and the important place that they have in our community, both for those who practice particular faiths and those who use them for other purposes. And so, it's very, very important to both Ariana and I and the people that worked with us on this plan to sit down and talk about what is going to be best for you. That's very different than the conversation we're going to have on alternate street parking.
Any other
Can I say
public
something
comment?
else, or is that not allowed?
Sure, Mark.
Just with what Sally said, I've always been a believer that when you move someplace, you have a right to expect things not to get worse. You have less of a right to expect things to get better. When I moved to where I live, it's a through street. I couldn't expect it to become a dead end. Okay? Now, if it suddenly became a through street that 20 times as many cars were using for some reason, I'd be concerned. The Prospect Street for years was both sides, and when we went to the bus, it was easy. People who moved there, they knew that. People on these other streets know that. I understand what you're saying, but I still think that's a very different. Anyway, I know it's a conversation. I'm just saying that aspect of it is different to make things better versus to
But you and I have both been around long enough to know that conversations at appropriate times with all parties involved are very important.
Okay, thank you.
Who else? No one?
I was just gonna mention the safety issue for alternate side, but Ariana beat me to it.
Sorry.
Consider it reiterated
It's good, I
then.
think it's,
All right then.
important.
Any announcements from board members?
God, I can't remember if
Yeah.
there are.
Sorry about that. I did the parking clarification, which I was going to do on the announcements. I just want to say that on Monday night in Town Hall at 7:30, the joint boards, known as in consolidation as the Umbrella Committee, are going to receive the reports. Good night.
Good
Night, thank you so
Are going
much.
to
I really
receive the
appreciate it.
reports of the study committees that have been working on planning and human resources and things like that. It will not include the finance committee because the finance committee is awaiting those reports. We've seen them already, but we're awaiting them in case the umbrella committee wants something in the finance thinking and recommendations to be tweaked. So, if you are interested in the topic, and I hope you are, okay, please join us at Town Hall at 7:30. Good night, you two.
Any other announcements?
Monday.
No other announcements? Okay. This next executive session is more a note to the board, that we'll need to do that at the end. Though I did speak to Hector and Elizabeth both, they were happy to stay till after the B3. Now the proposed consensus I put on there as an experiment. This is something that Stuart had proposed. Is this something people thought was worth doing?
What? What did you say?
On the agenda, the proposed consensus agenda, we just make one motion to adopt. Why don't I just we'll talk about that some other time.
I think it's a good idea, and you've given everyone the opportunity, if they want to take it off the consent agenda, they can. So that's a protection. So if you have routine business that can be done efficiently, then it gives you more time to discuss the more weighty issues. So I think it's a good idea.
Let's put it at the end, because in case there's some procedural things that people need to hash out. So, because we do have a couple people here specifically for agenda items. The first is something that's been on the agenda a couple times. A possibility for a green infrastructure stormwater management program project in Peace Park. We have an opinion of probable cost from earlier in the year for $112,000 for the status quo. And we have a revised opinion of probable cost from the engineer, which actually needs to be revised down again. SUNY is offering $25,000, not $20,000, if this partnership works out with the DEC and SUNY. So it would be approximately $84,000 to daylight a stream and expand the park itself down to connect right to the pit behind Village Hall. So because this is now we have the potential to partner with a larger project at SUNY, I've asked Emily, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your last name. Vale, thank you, from the Hudson River Estuary Program, who does outreach on green infrastructure. She has a short presentation, so if you want to get set up. Sure. And
While she's said,
please.
May I read a memo that I received? I don't know that the rest of the board received it, from Dr. Gerald Benjamin. Sally, there is going to be a presentation tonight on our collaborative project with the village entitled Planning and Implementing Green Infrastructure to Improve Watershed Resiliency in the Sawmill Brook Watershed and the Village of New Paltz. We have obtained $25,000 for materials for the village to assist in daylighting the storm drain in Peace Park. With this assistance, the cost to the village of dealing with the drainage issues in this location in a sustainable manner will be less than the cost of doing this in a conventional way. This is one element of a major effort being coordinated through CREO that involves research, education, and some small capital improvements on campus. I hope you can support this element of the project. Please be in touch if you need further information. That is from Dr. Benjamin. Katie, Emily's boss. But I wanted to share that with you. I received that today. Yes, you may have my copy. I think. Katie, do you think it's a private email to me? May I share it publicly?
You've not made it public.
Reading it is different.
However, if we could have, if you'll forward a copy to
the video team disagrees with you.
Yeah, I think the video tape.
While we're getting set up too, the last time this was on the board agenda, Stuart had a specific question about the cost for insurance. It's not going to fit. So I just want to make sure, because Stuart, I had that email in the packet from our commercials. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I read the email and I was glad to see that was the answer.
I have.
I'm gonna leave you in charge from this point. But at least everything's set up. My pleasure.
No, he said to answer this question.
Oh, it did, okay.
What was it?
Insurance cost.
Emily, please be.
Yeah, you're the bad list. Go away.
Screen?
You're almost on the bad list.
The whiteboard. Is this stuff on something?
Yes, as long as it goes.
Oh, we can't show it?
No, well, I'm gonna try PowerPoint free for 60 days.
Why don't you do the Google Docs PowerPoint? Does that work?
I have a PDF of it too, but I have a couple animations, so if I can get PowerPoint to work, great. If not, I'll just do the PDF and go through it.
I'm so sorry, Emily. When I tested it, I just did it with a thumb drive and a slideshow. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry.
Is there anything else we can be doing?
PowerPoint slide.
You know what? I'll just do the PDF. It's fine.
I better
You
move.
just have to be more.
Projector courtesy of
Could you give us a screen?
Oh, that at 11 o'clock. Oh, so I don't have Adobe Acrobat either?
You want to move the projector down to it?
Lucky we had a computer.
Tied to that laptop.
The computer runs on two systems. One that is that's my computer
Okay.
down in the office.
Take one of the locale.
Yeah, exactly.
Jason, why don't you move that down toward me so you're not stuck
Yeah, I'm
in
gonna.
the
But
cord?
after they're done, because they're connected.
Your
So-
Honor and members of the board, if you'll excuse me for a moment, I can set this up on my computer down in the office, which might have more accessibility, but the thumb drive has to be it has to be attached to the computer.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that what the board would like to do?
What?
You want to just give her a few minutes to set up the power? What would we all like to do?
You mean she needs to?
I can't open the PDF.
I don't.
Is there anything else
I
that has
don't
to be
need
done that could be done
PowerPoint
first?
presentation.
Me neither. That's what I was gonna say, but I don't know if that's
But
funny.
it says that it doesn't, so.
I mean, we can't do it. We can't do it.
I guess.
We have the slides. We don't have
Yeah, we don't. We have the slides.
It's a
Is it something that we could put on like our Facebook page or something like that? And we can watch it.
You can't just.
On a website.
You can't like. Do you have a Gmail? You just pull up Google Docs. They have a PowerPoint thing with that, and you can just use the slides to open that. So.
Sure. It's on the app.
That's why you're texting with the tech guy.
Oh right.
It's in there.
I don't know anything. We FaceTime. I can figure out what okay, it's going out.
Right here. So
I was like, why is this happening?
Well, that's when the
it's
camera's
upside
supposed
down.
to face. Wherever.
Oh, do I just need to do that? Oh, okay.
It's in the in between. I connected.
You it says you don't have Office. Do you not have Office on your computer?
It's because this is attached to this computer. It doesn't. If this was down in my office.
I asked my mom for it for Christmas.
And I tried to.
Kind of funny.
Just pull up Gmail.
Oh.
Can you get?
But
No, it doesn't have.
Yeah, you can use PowerPoint.
Oh, I see what you're
And there's a
saying.
PowerPoint program.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's a lawyer thing.
I like lawyer things.
It's a brand new.
Have a cigarette.
Might as well. Yeah, let's. I'm gonna.
Oh, you guys are gonna take a smoke break?
They're gonna be a minute.
Well, if you're gonna do that.
Give me just
All right, just do it right. Emily came all this way to do a PowerPoint. We can wait 5 minutes
And
and.
it is different from what we sent last week, because that was this week, and this one is more typical. It's for you.
Yeah, it's for this project.
Was anything looked at with like Secretary 13 and all that stuff?
So what's happening now?
I'm going to
That
No, because that's a different.
because I know that we have to have Acrobat in
This is
the
the
main
sawmill,
computer,
which
but
is
this has to
part
be
of the
done
dogs.
So give me 2 seconds.
Okay, and that is that actually
That's the name of
this.
this. No, it's that's the Millbrook. These names, I want to find out what the indigenous name is. Tell them because they would be so better. That's the Millbrook. That's the sawmill.
Give Hector a hug. I want to see you guys make
realize
a
that this
big
right
hug.
here is
Are we on?
That is, we're gonna try to, there's so many things that are underground. I'll say this again later.
We didn't have
This
Billy
is
Mays.
not some of
We
this.
had no Billy Mays.
So much stuff as part of the development.
Case closed. There's no argument.
So,
Is that
it's unclear. We know it comes comes from up
Yeah,
there.
now you have to
This
wait. Now
particular
you have to wait.
Here's the closer.
But this particular one, until it gets
Close.
mapped, we don't even know. There's speculation
Trustee
that it's
Glenn, I liked your
certified
memos.
A, and there's speculation that
I liked those memos.
My house, they're all, it's amazing how
I shouldn't have been
much.
sarcastic, but someone sarcastic to me, it's such temptation
Does it
to be
have anything
sarcastic.
I know that temptation.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I'm familiar with
I'm
it.
usually able to control it, but
Yes.
from time to time,
It's all, I don't know if that's, there's overlapping watersheds, and I don't have the song
You don't, yeah.
watershed right in front of me, so I don't wanna.
Oh.
Right, I'm just
We've got a break going on, Jason Logan.
We mapped the sewer up through to 32, I know. There's storm sewer.
These are the things
all
that we have to
connected there.
bring our minds together and data together, and that's part of the goal of the project.
That was a report that was done to the town when they were looking at that.
You want to
trying to figure
Right.
out what was going in there.
Yeah.
Certainly looked at that.
Yeah, cool. That's part of my job, is that I have to do that as part of this.
Something that may be helpful. Carol Johnson, I don't know how she found this, but it was an article that's probably only about 15 years old, but it discussed how, what areas of the stream were covered, and we think it is one and the same. So that's actually included in the trustees packet.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. I had actually emailed Carol Johnson recently to ask her
What?
if she
What's
knew
going on?
the Native
Oh, they went out for a
American
smoke
name
break
for,
and we're chilling
the
until
millwork, so
maybe
it's funny that I didn't think
whatever.
to ask her.
I guess we need to know the after.
We'll make sure that.
I'm having technical difficulty.
How you doing?
Cool. I'm
How are
surprised
you?
you didn't bring that up.
I'm good.
He's gonna take the red one,
Bye.
you know, I can tell.
No, I was thinking about doing the. These are my favorite.
Save the pink one for Ariana.
In honor
Well,
of Monica.
I don't think I'm gonna eat any of these.
Let me turn this
Variety.
thing around for you, dear.
I don't want to eat these donuts. I don't work at Dunkin' Donuts. I know what goes
It'll give
on
you a
there.
reason to
Do
get
not
What goes
eat-
on there?
exercise.
Do not
in it.
eat or drink anything.
You can be walking and
What are they
biking it
doing
off,
there?
girl.
It's
Do
like things aren't so.
No,
Brush it
not
up,
having
in
a
my
good time.
opinion. I'm
No?
sure those things are covered in high fructose corn syrup.
Oh yeah, I was listening today about spikes in the blood sugar related toward sweet foods.
I need a spike.
It made me sad because I really like donuts.
No, I don't want to.
Make your own donuts.
They're still loaded with.
Yeah.
You're not making like
Use maple syrup.
brand donut.
Don't use maple syrup. Don't use sugar.
Still like fructose
This
or
is
some sort of sugar.
Reduce the
Yeah.
sugar.
It'll reduce it,
Yeah, but
right?
it's not just
Reduce
high
the sugar in
fructose
general.
syrup.
What do you
Practically
mean?
everything I make is a reduced sugar.
What does that mean?
As far as
I just use less of it. I balance out the other flavors.
32,
Yeah.
I think it's past 32. It's up by the middle school. It's starting.
Yeah, it had. In essence, when I'm connected to my desktop, I'm actually almost running two computers out of the same area, and so if it's not connected to the laptop
It's up
to
there,
the
I know, it's up
to the
to
desktop,
32.
the desktop can't
We
run.
mapped all of the.
Can't use its
all the way
operating
down,
systems to run it.
picked
Huh.
up the flows.
Interesting.
running through the village and everything that dumps in.
Um,
We'll show you
is
what
that gonna-
pipes are in right now.
Right, now
We
I
can
can
show you everything.
Yeah, but you know where the pipes are, so
Yeah.
that's, you know.
Contact.
But that's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not even necessarily exactly where it was, right?
If
You can
projector
train it to
button
do that,
is
right? Lots
button's
of
lock,
engineering.
press
A little bit of dirt.
and hold
Yeah.
on button for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Not a good thing.
I'm not, I did a time.
Was that 3 seconds? Were you counting?
Projector before? Didn't you check the projector before?
Yes, it worked just fine when I was running off a thumb drive and
And we were like,
I did,
we have juice.
Everything plugged in?
Oh, no.
No, that was fine. I didn't mind
Figured out
that
the
at all.
problem.
I will apologize when I need to apologize.
I don't.
That is not a problem for me.
Apologize. That was not an apology.
No, I don't mind apologizing.
Separation of church and state.
I believe in separation of church
Well-
and state, but
It's a different issue.
but yeah, what I was quoted as saying.
I don't know what you were quoted saying. I don't read the New
You don't
York
read the New
Times.
York Times. What I was quoted as saying was not.
It was like this.
It was like, I hate Jesus and I'm an anti-Semite. Is basically what it is.
I circled
Look,
a
if
few
you're
things
hating
here
everyone
rather than
equally
go
though,
into
that's
it.
fair. Equal. equal hatred under the
it's
law.
a typo or a word left out or
What they want you
something.
to do.
If it doesn't make any sense to you, let me know. But I think that'll be
there's no
obvious.
hatred.
There's none, you're saying.
So
It has nothing to
you
do
know,
with it. It's more
just
like
look at it and see if it's.
I was just trying to do something more
not
environmentally
many.
sustainable, but I guess I'm not gonna be able to get rid of
What's
cars in
happening?
the village for quite some time.
And you probably already picked these things up, but in case.
And I have gone through them a second time
Oh, God.
because after I do them and I read through them one time, I also usually ask the deputy to just go through
Oh,
and see
sure,
if she sees
okay.
something.
It's always good to have another.
Hey, there we go.
Hi-oh.
Okay, so can we make it smaller?
Well,
Fits
that's-
on the way? Or is that
Oh no, we just have to pull it back through the wall.
that'll make it bigger, right? Yes, they were.
Okay, wait, hold up.
No.
Zoom.
Hardware.
Oh yeah.
Oh, go Brian.
See? You can do these things.
I'm trying to think.
You know.
I just think it's really.
Oh, yeah, forward is, you're right.
Emily, may I drop the, because I won't be allowed to leave the meeting again.
Or maybe
Can I drop the thumb drive off to KT tomorrow?
Yeah,
my lunch?
that's fine.
I'll run over to the campus during my lunch and I'll drop it off
Yeah.
to
Is there a reason?
So do we have the software to do this from now on?
Yeah.
Well, it was just Adobe
KT.
Acrobat.
We just had to
yeah.
go through my desk.
Brian, I think you're really becoming the most fashionable trustee.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, no.
What are you trying to
I
say?
think fashionable. Stuart has classic gravitas.
Yeah, I have no class.
That's the look.
Ariana's just, you know.
Just chilling.
He's hip.
Right. Thank you though. Thank you.
She usually has a scarf though.
I just read a
but
scoop
out here
article
you-
about
she's
all
got the
different-
scarf.
Oh, onion, nice. And what Brian's wearing this season?
Nice ensemble.
Nice ensemble, yeah.
And Stuart's tie.
If it wasn't for Amanda, I would just be wearing like rags, and I'd just come with like a ripped shirt.
she's the one
She
that
picks,
is.
she knows like she got me this. The scarf was a gift, but the jeans were her. Like you know,
You're working the hair.
the hair's the new thing.
The new thing, have you watched it?
Even that.
Is there a way, see this Zoom here? Is
Also,
there?
we did. That's the most. That's
That is
maximum
whatever
zoom.
you were reading when I came in.
We would have to like bring it
Oh,
closer.
yeah, you
It
want
would be the only game we could do at the point.
I did quote you correctly.
These are a couple of memos, but the
It wasn't
original.
malevolent what you said. It was just we were thinking out loud.
You left out the Hail Satan part though, and that was very upsetting to me. The Hail Satan at the end.
I would keep it in this.
Under.
I didn't want to be sensationalist.
Well, of course not.
There's like two different problems here. The first problem is that this.
And her God is
slide
resting.
isn't showing up, so I just need to, yeah.
Well, I was just talking. I was like, I need Jesus and I'm an anti-Semite, clearly.
Okay, I think that'll work. Okay.
When you
Can
I mean,
make
if
double
you
page
lowered,
now?
if you minimize that window a little bit, then it would fit. You can use that to
By
finish
just
over.
hitting page
To fix it to the
double
board.
page. I don't see where I do that.
obviously
It's kind of obvious.
I'm Jewish.
I understand all that.
Yeah, exactly, but is that okay?
So what if we?
I don't, Ray, I just don't see where that is on here, or what is, to make the slide a little bit smaller, you see what I mean?
Right.
Do you want to adjust this thing?
We already did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad, it's, I mean,
We're close enough.
I mean,
I think we get it. It's cool.
wait, right here, you mean this?
I forgot to
No,
revise
no,
it.
no, no, no.
It's
I took
27.
it off the
Close
side.
enough for government.
So it should be 84,640.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Alright, alright.
Yeah, we'll
I'll
read
read
it.
my slide headings out loud.
Why don't we just forget?
I'm not gonna vote on this. I don't know
Got it
what's
up?
like.
Got it.
I think I would enjoy it if these donuts were moved together.
Out of Temptations. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to
Oh,
eat
geez.
those
All
corn
right.
syrup.
Emily,
Alright.
it's all you.
Wait, we have
Great.
popcorn.
Not from Dunkin' Donuts.
Thank you everyone for your patience in getting set up for this presentation. I'm gonna stand over here if that's okay, so I can
Sure.
use the computer and put the visual obviously up here. So my name is Emily Vale. I work for the Hudson River Estuary Program as part of the New York State DEC, also affiliated with the Canals Water Resource Institute. And I'm going to talk today about stormwater runoff, how that impacts our water bodies in this region, green infrastructure to manage stormwater, give some examples of practices. We'll talk about the benefits of green infrastructure and things that you can do at a municipal level to help promote some of these practices. So the Hudson River Estuary Program is a part of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. We're based right up the road at the DEC office here in New Paltz. And our mission is fivefold: to ensure clean water, protect and restore fish, wildlife, and their habitats,
provide water recreation and river access, adapt to climate change, and conserve the world-famous scenery. So one of the first things I like to do is talk about what a watershed is. So a watershed is the land area that drains to a particular body of water. So here in New Paltz, obviously we're in the Wallkill River watershed, but we're also in the Hudson River watershed. And I think managing water at pretty much any scale, it's really important to look at what the watershed is, whether it's a drainage basin for a small sewer or it's a huge basin like the Wallkill. So in general, paved surfaces increase stormwater runoff. So even in a natural setting, when rain or snow falls on the ground, we see most of that, do I have the arrow here? Infiltrating into the ground. So whether it's shallow or deep infiltration, it recharges groundwater, it soaks into the soil. Some of it is used by plants as evapotranspiration, and a small amount of it, maybe 10%, is considered runoff. It runs off the ground surface. As you add development, as you add paved surfaces or impervious surfaces that prevent water from going into the ground, you see a little bit less infiltration, a little bit more runoff. And then as you have more development and more impervious surface cover, you see even more stormwater runoff. So going from 10% in a natural scenario to 55% is a really big difference. That's a much larger volume of water that's trapped above the ground surface, and all of that water has to go somewhere. And that's where stormwater management comes in. So stormwater carries pollutants, that's what it says on the top, and we've found that most stream impairments in the region, in the Hudson Valley region, are due to polluted runoff. There's documented impacts for nearly 35% of water bodies, but in reality it's probably even higher than that. Yeah, I'll get there. Yep. I was gonna say, I think I know where that is. So,
where's your bedroom?
That's it. That's around the corner from me.
I used to live in that house. Yes.
What is the Box Factory?
Yeah.
So traditionally, stormwater management has involved taking stormwater runoff from an impervious or paved surface, taking it directly into a storm sewer, and taking it directly into a stream. That's the case in a lot of places in New Paltz, like this one here. So here we have a construction site that has a silt fence that really isn't working very well. There's a lot of sediment coming down. Yeah. This could be considered a violation.
So I took photos that look exactly like this and sent them to our building department.
Yeah, so you don't want to have an increase in sediment and turbidity. So there's a storm drain right here, and we see all of this water running off the ground surface into the storm drain and then right into the Wallkill here. That's the same water that's coming down. Yep. So this is used in a lot of places, and if you think about the dirt that's being carried by that water, a lot of other things are being carried by that water too. So there are water quality problems associated with stormwater. It carries sediment, which we were just talking about, but also nutrients, road salt, oil and grease, and trash. These are all things that stormwater carries directly into streams. There are also water quantity problems associated with stormwater that are really important to consider, like flooding. In more urban areas, we see the water going faster as it falls more quickly into streams, and that can lead to what we call flashier streams, so very quick rises in stream flow, and then it'll fall off. We also have problems with erosion in some places as a result of water quantity and this quick rush of water that comes down to streams. And we could also have problems with sewage overflows if excess water is going into combined sewer systems, but also sanitary sewer systems if there are problems with inflow and infiltration. So what is green infrastructure? Green infrastructure is a different approach to stormwater that uses natural and engineered systems that mimic nature. The idea is to manage stormwater runoff by maintaining or restoring a more natural hydrology, similar to that first picture that I showed with only 10% runoff. And you do that by allowing stormwater to infiltrate into the soil and be used by plants. So thinking more about that more natural scenario. So we have a difference here. It says gray versus green infrastructure on the top. And this is what we would consider gray infrastructure. It's your normal catch basin that takes the water right into a stream. And this is a green infrastructure approach. So instead of going into a pipe, you have that water going into the soil, being used by plants, obviously a much more aesthetically pleasing option than the gray infrastructure. So green infrastructure can be implemented at a regional or a local scale, or even a site-specific scale in many cases. It includes low-impact development projects. These are basically the same set of practices and principles, just in a slightly different name, I guess, for infrastructure. And it provides multiple benefits. It does this by slowing down the flow of runoff, so you don't have the water going into streams so quickly. It removes pollutants as the water filters through the soil. It keeps water out of the storm sewer system, which is important in combined sewer areas, but also in helping separated sewers not reach their capacity, which can be important for climate change, especially as we're thinking about that. And it also increases the amount of vegetation in the landscape, which has a number of benefits as well. So the picture is the lower Esopus Creek. This is a vegetated stream buffer, and we can think of that as a regional or a natural green infrastructure. So green infrastructure requirements. In August 2010, the New York State Stormwater Management Design Manual was updated. There's a whole chapter on green infrastructure practices, and essentially new development that disturbs a certain size threshold is required to reduce runoff first using green infrastructure. So the Stormwater Management Design Manual outlines 3 steps for implementing green infrastructure. The first is planning, and the first part of that is preserving natural areas to avoid producing stormwater. The second is reducing impervious surface cover to reduce the amount of stormwater that you have to produce at a site. And then the last step is actually implementing green infrastructure practices to manage the stormwater that is produced. So green infrastructure planning is the heading. And as I said, the first step, preserving natural areas. This includes things like reducing the disturbance area, using conservation or cluster development. And the second is reducing impervious surface cover. So in this picture, we have the same parcel with 2 different development scenarios. We have a traditional subdivision on the one side with large roads, large disturbance areas, presumably, although they don't show up, long driveways, a lot of paved areas, a lot of natural areas that have been developed. In the conservation subdivision, we have the same number of units, but the farmland is preserved, the buffer around the stream in that top corner is preserved, and there's a lot fewer impervious surface cover. So that's an example of green infrastructure planning. The second is green infrastructure practices, so it's on top. And these are natural features or engineered practices that infiltrate runoff on site. So 2 important principles are to treat stormwater closer to where the rain falls. So if you have a roof, you want to have maybe a small practice right at the base of the downspout instead of having that water travel further. And also several small practices instead of one large one. So thinking about several different small-scale practices instead of one large detention pond or one large storage tank, something like that. So we have a number of different examples on our website, and I'll go through some of those now, local examples in our region. So rain gardens and bioretention areas are one of the most basic forms of green infrastructure that people talk about. So rain gardens are shallow depressions filled with plants. They take stormwater and allow it to slowly infiltrate through the soil. The plants use that water, it filters it slows down its flow. Bioretention area is basically a larger version of a rain garden. So a couple examples locally, in Kingston, the Ulster County Department of the Environment has a rain garden that takes runoff from the roof of the Department of the Environment and treats it there. And the Kingston Library just built a rain garden to disconnect its rooftop runoff as well from the combined sewer system. So porous pavement is another type of green infrastructure. This is a paved surface that actually allows the stormwater to infiltrate through it. There's lots of different kinds. The picture on the right is at the New York State Parks Recreation and Historic Preservation Office in Statsburg. That's porous concrete. It actually has holes in the concrete so the water can go right through into the base, sub-base. And then on the other picture are pervious pavers. So there's spaces in between these paving blocks that let the water go right through. Green roofs are another example. These are layers of soil and vegetation actually on top of rooftops, on top of buildings that capture that runoff or that stormwater, that rainfall, exactly where it falls. They can be large roofs like the one at Marist College, or they can be very small roofs like this little gardener shed that this guy is so enthusiastic about. Rain barrels or cisterns capture and store rooftop runoff to reuse for watering plants or other uses. A couple different examples of those. Cisterns are basically larger versions of rain barrels that can capture more water. Stream buffer restoration is another example, again, of natural green infrastructure. Vegetation alongside streams improves stream health, filters and slows polluted runoff, and provides many other benefits like shading the streams, providing habitat, and so on. So a couple local examples. These are both from our Trees for Tribs program, which I'll explain later. Another example of green infrastructure as defined by the Stormwater Design Manual is stream daylighting. That's the heading here. So stream daylighting is restoring streams that were previously buried underground in a culvert or pipe to better manage the runoff and provide habitat. So these could be large-scale projects like the Sawmill River in Yonkers that went through a multi-billion dollar restoration, or a relatively small-scale project like at the Parks, Rec, and Historic Preservation Office, where it was a much smaller stream that was in a pipe that they daylighted there. Other types of green infrastructure practices, just quickly, vegetated swales, there's a picture here, are basically linear rain gardens. So instead of transporting water in a pipe, they transport water above ground and let the water soak into the soil as it travels across the ground. Street trees can play an important role in capturing runoff, especially in more developed areas. Stormwater planters are basically a rain garden in a box. Rain garden is really the base of a lot of these. So this is a stormwater planter that's on a little bus shelter down in Westchester. And lastly, disconnecting downspouts. So having your downspouts go to a vegetated area instead of either a paved area or directly into the sewer system. So there's a lot of different types of green infrastructure and a lot of different applications for green infrastructure. It says residential green infrastructure on the top, and so there's a couple examples of rain barrels, pervious pavers, and pervious asphalt in a residential setting. A lot of people have rain gardens in their backyards too. I just don't have a picture of that. This is commercial examples of green infrastructure. Pervious asphalt, bioretention at different commercial plazas, and then an example of pervious pavers being installed at a business. There's also examples of municipal green infrastructure. I think implementing green infrastructure at municipally owned property is a great way to show people that these are practices that work, that they're great options for managing runoff. So whether it's at a highway garage or at the village or town hall, the village of Greenwood Lake actually did a large-scale stormwater overhaul of their site. They got a large grant from the state to do some pervious pavers, rain garden, and that vegetated swale that I showed earlier. There's also campus green infrastructure. You're thinking in this case of college or university campus, but in general, campuses can think about better managing runoff through green infrastructure. So there's a rain garden at SUNY Orange in Middletown. There's a green roof and a cistern combination at SUNY Orange in Newburgh. This is a great system. It's actually right above the parking garage, so you wouldn't even know that it was a green roof, but it actually feels like a park. But it's over that, what would be just a paved surface. They've really made that into a resource. Yeah. And then they also capture runoff in a cistern from another section of the roof, and they use that to water the green roof during drier periods. So that's a really nice combination of practices. And then there's several rain gardens at Vassar College as well. So what are some of the benefits of green infrastructure? We already talked about managing stormwater, both in terms of water quality and water quantity. It can recharge groundwater. Green infrastructure and in general vegetation can help cool urban areas, which can lead to a pretty substantial energy savings, especially in the summer if you don't need to use as much air conditioning. It can provide wildlife with habitat, especially if you use native species for your plantings. It can improve air quality. Again, this is in general vegetation, and urban landscapes can do that. It can improve human health and safety, both for the air quality, but also improving drainage in certain areas can help reduce risks of hydroplaning, black ice, that sort of thing. Green infrastructure can also increase land values and certainly beautify neighborhoods. So in terms of quantifying the benefits, which is what that top thing says, there have been several studies looking at some of the economic benefits of green infrastructure. Most of these are done in areas with combined sewer overflows, But I wanted to bring up the example of Philadelphia. They did a really interesting study that they called the triple bottom line study. So they looked at 2 different scenarios of implementing gray infrastructure, mostly storage tanks, to deal with their combined sewer overflow problem, and a green infrastructure strategy, which really aggressively used rain gardens, green roofs, and these other practices to manage that runoff. And they looked at it over a 40-year period, and they found that green infrastructure would provide substantially more benefits than gray infrastructure, and they actually did a calculation of how the dollar values of those other benefits. So I have a handout if anyone is interested in what some of those other ones are, but in general they found that it would save energy, $33.7 million worth of energy savings, again because the vegetation cools, especially paved urban areas. It increased residential property values by over $1 billion. It helped avoid almost 200 fatalities from heat stress, again another important human health component. And it created over 15,000 jobs for local laborers, which avoided significant social services costs. So while most economic examples are in combined sewer overflow areas, these are benefits that, in general, over a long-term period with an aggressive scenario, you could expect to see. So implementing green infrastructure. Homeowners, watershed groups, neighborhoods, regional planners, businesses, colleges and universities, and municipalities all play a really key role in implementing green infrastructure. Everyone lives and works in a watershed. Everyone can have a role to play in better stormwater management. Municipalities in particular, with planning and codes and ordinances, have a key role, along with demonstration sites, which I talked about earlier. So what can you do? Like I said, planning for green infrastructure can be really important. You can visit some of the local practices that I showed pictures of. We have a whole lot of other examples as well. Help build demonstration projects. We have several resources at the Hudson River Estuary Program as well that I'll just go through now. So as I mentioned, we have a website with a number of examples of local practices, green roofs, porous pavement, rain gardens, and we have information listed like this, so you can find out more about how much a particular practice cost, who implemented or designed it, and then we also have a map so you can see where some of these projects are located. It says review local codes and ordinances on the top. We found that a great idea for municipalities to make sure local codes and ordinances aren't limiting the types of green infrastructure that can come in, or to go through this code and ordinance worksheet that was designed for New York State. There's 2 case studies that have been done, the town of Wappinger and the town of Clinton, and those are also available on our website. It says participate in Trees for Tribs. Trees for Tribs, or Trees for Tributaries, is a program that we offer. It provides free native trees and shrubs to volunteer groups to plant along streams that eventually flow to the Hudson River. We have plantings in the spring and fall, and we're always looking for more sites to replant. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a couple. I was glad to see that about the rain gardens. There's been a proposal to put rain gardens in Hasbrook Park, and hopefully we can fund that somehow to make that a demonstration project. On the question about the daylighting the streams encourages wildlife habitat, what about things like mosquitoes? Is that a problem? Because the same people who would like to do that probably would not like to use pesticides either. So,
sure.
So what do you recommend for that, or isn't it a problem?
I haven't had too much experience working with daylighted streams in particular. In general, mosquitoes are a concern for green infrastructure practices because you don't want water ponding in those places. For different practices, there's different solutions. So rain barrels, for example, you have water stored in a barrel. Most people put screening on top so mosquitoes can't get in and lay eggs. Rain gardens and other practices are designed so they don't pond for extended periods of time. You want that water to get into the ground. You don't want the mosquito breeding area. I think with a stream, and again, this is not my real area of expertise, but in a healthy aquatic system, you would have things eating mosquitoes. And if you have a stream that's, I think, daylighted properly, it would be running most of the time. And hopefully it would be home to a number of aquatic insects, like dragonflies and caddisflies and mayflies and so on, and not just a mosquito area. Yeah.
Dave, you had, I thought I saw your hand go.
It's just a matter of keeping the water moving and you won't have a mosquito problem.
Yeah.
So is that only a problem maybe in the dry time in August or something?
You can design the
Pumps or
ditch or
something.
the swale or you can daylight so you've got various channels in it for overflow channels and for low stream conditions.
Mhm.
The real key is to keep it moving. If it keeps moving, you don't have mosquitoes.
Are you familiar with the project that's being proposed here, or because the presentation obviously was this? Oh, so you're okay.
KT said she could say a few words. I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier. KT can say a few words about the SUNY's project and how this got included in that, and David agreed to come because he understands things like engineering and physics.
And design.
And design.
And design.
Yeah. Real expert. And he used to be a NASCAR race driver. Which, I know. I'm trying to get people to believe that, though. That's all. But KT, could you said you had an answer to Brian's question?
I mean, we just thought Emily could give an overview
Sure.
of green infrastructure, and then I could talk about the particular SUNY project and then the sub project that we're
Sure.
proposed.
Yeah, because I was just kind of thinking of how these facts relate to our project. But if you want to go first, then maybe it'd be a question best suited when everyone
have general questions, I can go.
does their stuff.
I should also say that, and I didn't include this in this presentation, but green infrastructure is a great way to think about climate change and climate change adaptation, whether it's, well, especially with increased precipitation events, storms, flooding. Green infrastructure can be a really important tool to improve resiliency, and that's very much where this SUNY project fits in.
Thanks so much,
Thank you so
Emily.
much.
Thanks.
Should I just unplug this? Is that bad to do?
Actually, you have to turn it off
You hit
with
the
the bin,
power.
stop moving,
Yeah.
and then we can unplug.
All right.
Hit the green guy.
I'll let her do it.
Have the red one.
Mid. Oh.
There we go. Shutting down.
Red and set.
So, KT, you wanted to just take a minute and see,
Sure.
because it was it's a big part about how this came in. I mean, $25,000 off a stormwater project is not chump change. So,
Okay, so, I mean, I think that you all are familiar with CREO. I will be speaking as KT Tobin, Deputy Director of CREO. We do research on regional, research in the region and about the region. So, we cover lots of different topic areas, but both Jerry Benjamin, my boss, and I are very interested in sustainability issues. We're both serving on the consortium for the Mid-Hudson Planning Sustainability process. We've released multiple discussion briefs on this topic. I didn't bring copies for everybody because you can read them all online. I just wanted to pull them up. One on water conservation and long-term water supply planning about a proposed desalinization in Rockland County. And then another one with Emily's colleague at DEC, Scott Cuppett, that some of you may know because he's from Paltz as well, about Hudson Valley water opportunities and challenges. We're pretty lush when it comes to water, but we have a lot of, we have distribution system issues which lead to local overuse, even though we have this huge abundance of water, which becomes quite clear when we flood. So we're very interested in water. We've been working with Emily, who, thank you so much, you're a rock star. I just think she's the greatest. I saw her do this presentation at Creek Week on campus and knew I wanted her to give you this overarching story of green infrastructure. And we've been working with Scott Cuppett and Fran Dunwell that runs the estuary program for a while, trying to figure out ways as state agencies that we could work together to get things going on campus. This particular project is part of a much larger project. I don't know if I sent this to you, but a flood resilience and climate change portfolio that's funding projects at SUNY ESF, which is the Environmental Science and Forestry College, lots at Cornell, which is where the Water Research Institute is, which is very connected to the estuary program, Cornell Cooperative. So there's this whole suite of flood resilience and climate change projects across the region, of which this is just one, SUNY New Paltz. And as Emily said, it's basically the overarching idea is watershed resiliency to climate change and flooding while improving water quality and restoring watersheds. We just released, we didn't just release. I'm the chair of the Campus Sustainability Committee, and the president of the college is about to submit this plan to a national organization that the campus signed on to quantify our carbon footprint and make a commitment to reduce our carbon footprint. So one of the first big acts was to get this sustainability committee together and create a sustainability plan. And part of that is dovetails with our landscape master plan, which says that we're going to do green infrastructure. So the campus has made this commitment in multiple ways. So we have this interest at CREO. The campus is saying they're interested in these issues, and Chancellor Nancy Zimpher also has her Power of SUNY initiative, which commits to Energy Smart New York, and in general is supportive of SUNY being more environmentally cognizant. So the goals of this SUNY New Paltz project is improving water quality, providing environmental education opportunities, measuring resilience to climate change, increasing the capacity of stormwater management infrastructure, and reducing the severity and impacts of floods. It was a very significant event that we had to, that after Irene, campus was closed for multiple days. So we've been right there, and I know many of you, I worked with you during Irene, dealing with the floods. So this has had some very significant impacts on the campus, including economic impacts. So it's definitely noted as important. The Sawmill Brook is the, you should have gotten a map in your packets, not to be confused with the Mill Brook, which is more towards Woodland Pond, is the brook that runs through campus. The reason people are daylighting streams now is because when the environment was built, the built environment, things were buried and put underground. And so some of this sawmill is above the big pond in the middle of campus, but a lot of it is underground. This project will utilize, I'm working with Dave Richardson, you may know him. He's a natural scientist on campus. I'm all about merging the social scientists with the natural scientists. We have to talk to each other if we're gonna deal with climate change. He is gonna do lots of water quality testing all along the sawmill and before and after storm events on the impacts of water quality. And the sawmill flows down through campus and ends up to the Wallkill. I just learned from Dave that the stream in Peace Park actually may even be like right by my house because the stormwater drain is buried up. You got it as far as the middle school, as far as it goes?
I think it splits about the middle school, but 32 on down.
Yeah, so lots of stuff underwater. It wasn't necessarily always in that place, and the engineers moved this water around. So part of this project, in addition to testing all this water quality on campus, is also mapping. And we're going to be mapping the streams that are buried underground to figure out what's going on there so we can figure out and address these issues. And we're also going to be mapping trees because we need to take an inventory of trees on campus because they play a vital role in drainage systems. So that's a big piece of the water quality testing part. We're also going to be, this didn't pay for all of it, but DEC was very interested in, Emily mentioned demonstration projects. That we need to be leaders. We're such a large institution. We really need to be on the forefront, not just doing these things, but showing and educating about these things. So the new lot on 32, permeable pavement, bioswales behind Lenape Residence Hall, more bioretention. There's some there now in rain gardens in front of Chris Bell. And as part of this package, literally, Jerry and I were walking up from P&G's one day, and Jason and Kurt were standing there and said to Jerry, look, we want to daylight this stream, and Jerry was so excited because this is something he really believes in. And almost in the same week, I got a call from DEC. They heard about that, the village had this idea to daylight, and they said, can you put this as part of this project? We want to help the village make this happen because these are the things that we want municipalities to be doing. So that was literally how this happened. And many of you know I was on the school board. So we all want to work together, right? The campus and the school district and the municipalities. And there's so many barriers, you know? So it ends up that the best way for us to help you, and I worked on this with Jackie DeStefano before she left, is to provide materials. You know, we're not going to monitor your labor or the project, but just like the campus gives the gas for the fire trucks, is that it? You know, it's easier to say, here's the stuff so you can do what you want to do. So that's how Jackie DeStefano advised us to provide this $2,500 to get you on your way to do this project. There's also going to be another component, which is an interpretive map, so that we are going to highlight, and I want to do more of this on campus with the trees and everything else, these locations so they showcase these practices. We're going to develop curriculum so school kids can take field trips to campus and see these practices to really, you know, we have to change the built environment, but we also have, I'm a sociologist, we have to change the culture. People need to see these things, and as educators, and you know, me, myself, and I, you know, we're in crisis. So we need to change, and we need to, as a large institution, be in the forefront of that. And DEC has been wanting to partner with us so we can really push the envelope with this stuff. So there's going to be this whole tour, and I did hear you wanted to do rain gardens in Hasbrook, and maybe even pervious pavement in on Hasbrook, which the campus was also very happy to hear about, because I think that there's safety implications that we should, you know, address there. So if you do put those other practices, we'd like to put that as part of our map. We'd like to put the daylighting. We will include the signage. You know, this would be a true collaboration between the campus and the village.
And actually, let me start before I forget, Katie. There's one other. There also has been some informal offers of help from the campus. John Shoup, I can't remember his title, but he's the head of the facilities. Mm-hmm. He'd offered, for example, you know, if we need fill, they've got a pile that they're not using. I don't know if you've been up and seen the stone benches down that main canyon there. He said they had some others left over if we needed benches. And so people have been kind of stepping forward. One person offered some stone from a quarry they have if we need some extra stone. So there have been some really interesting kind of people coming out of the woodwork to support this idea.
Yeah, I'm working very closely with John Shoup to implement these practices on campus, and he's a member of the sustainability committee. He's definitely very supportive of doing these things, and I know the mayor's been meeting with him. You know, we just got to chip away and find ways to help each other, and this is just the latest iteration of, you know, something that we've committed that we want to do on campus, and we want to help the village implement it as well. There's one other thing. There's going to be an event as part of this package, and you might want to mark your calendars for April 24th. There is the Hudson River Science Symposium. We're hoping to have, you know, our progress thus far as part of a presentation at that conference on the 24th. I think that there's other stuff. You got this scope of work description with some more details. You know, you all know how to find me. You can ask me now, you can ask me later.
I have a question. You mentioned something about adding like the Hasbro Park rain gardens or something. That would be only if we did that
as
on
part
our
of the
own,
map.
not as part of what we can do
This
with.
is for the daylighting.
This is only for the daylight. We
Emily,
can't try to do
I mean,
these
I can't
things.
put words in DEC's or Cornell's mouth, but you know, they're looking for a showcase project for daylighting, and they want the Village of New Paltz to be that showcase project.
Oh, for daylighting in particular?
Well, that's why they're interested in
Well, I
daylighting.
noticed it's, you know, there's examples of the other things here, like the permeable pavement, the rain gardens, which when I thought about it, I was like, oh, what are the Hasbrook rain gardens? But these are rain gardens as an example, so I could see why they would want, you know, one of each, essentially, if we're doing a showcase.
I mean, we can talk offline. I mean, there's all sorts of, I'm trying to help DEC make more connections with municipalities and apply for grants. I think I even said to you, I would love to help, you know, ENCC help write grants, you know, to get things done. There's certain
we need members if you want to be one.
This project is for the daylighting. for materials for the daylighting. There's definitely opportunities to get money for rain gardens and other things. I mean, you saw the examples, you know, all over the region.
Right,
A lot of those, and not just DEC. So, welcome back, Senator.
I want to support and express, I mean, I read Jerry's letter to us asking us to support Kate. He spoke about the collaboration. I think there has been a significant effort on the college's part to collaborate with the village of New Paltz. The first big example was their support of the 125th celebration. I think it is high time that this community embrace the college, that we be a part of the college, and that we work together to do a lot of good things together. Question, deadline, is there a deadline date? You didn't mention that, and I understood there was.
We've been, you know, we're very close to a signed contract, and once we have that, it's really, do you want this money or do you not want this money? You know, if
So
you don't
we
want
need-
this money, I go back to DEC and the Water Research Institute and say,
So if we want the
What can
money,
I-
we better grab it and run.
I'm not gonna give it to anybody else until you say no.
No. I will give it to someone else.
Do I like that
Don't
answer?
say yes soon.
It may not even be my decision, they may just say no.
She got it backwards.
I don't know what they're gonna do,
Right.
but
And also, just too, I forgot to mention, Dave Klauser's volunteered to come out and, because he could answer any engineering questions I couldn't, and as actually for a development project that was proposed for the pit, I believe if I say it right, you studied was a 6-acre watershed of this particular stream or the impact. So you've studied this particular area for a project in the past.
I think just in this stream that you're going to daylight, there was a 6-acre watershed above that. As I recall, there's quite a few acres that goes into the pit. There's other tributaries that goes into the pit and then finally out. I wanted to say too that 2 weeks ago I was in White Plains talking to the DEC. I don't know if this is a distinction or not, but New Paltz is becoming an MS4 community next year.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a big deal. A lot of it is education too. So I think there's.
Could you say a word about what that means?
Municipal separate storm sewer system. Go for it.
So the MS4 program is the Municipal Separated Storm Sewer System program, and it's based on population density. And the next year, New Paltz will be an MS4, and they're subject to slightly stricter regulation and accounting requirements. So there's 6 minimum control measures that are part of the MS4 permit, and 2 out of the 6 are really focused on education and involving the public. There's 4 others too.
Stricter rules for what in particular?
So, rules for managing stormwater.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really what the focus is. I can try to name all 6, but.
No, that's fine.
There'll be 2 code additions that you'll be making. One's the stormwater management code.
Yeah.
Another one is illicit discharges, where you've got a program that you're looking for things that contaminate the surface waters.
Wow.
The DEC puts out a kind of a template code, and you need to take that and tailor it to the community. We wrote the MS4 program for another community, and it's not that difficult, but it will take some commitment of funds. There's some staff training that will be happening, and a lot of public education.
one thing that might help you get ready for that, I've worked with Emily, it went by pretty fast and I wanna make sure you'll miss it, is the code and ordinance worksheet that they developed.
I put that down in my
It's
new zoning
really
laws
great.
document.
Actually,
So look it up.
We are in the middle of our last Water Resource Institute program, which they gave real money to analyze how all the local municipalities around Ulster County are dealing with water. And the mayor, you you took that survey, which I adapted the code and ordinance worksheet for part of that, so it might look a little familiar to you, but it's really well done, and it will definitely help prepare for that, and it's just a great tool anyway. But you need help from Dave to look out.
Tell me that we were actually a little surprised that we rated pretty high on that because the town's code is pretty ancient. There were some things that the town did well with.
And so, if for argument's sake we run around in daylight, all sorts of streams all over New Paltz, how does that help us with the MS4 requirements? Is it just because we can manage a higher volume of storm surge? Is it more detailed than that?
It's more detailed than that.
Okay.
There's one thing that has to be done is all of the outfalls needs to be mapped. That's part of the program. You set your program up, and the one that I did, it was a 5-year program where you got to do so many steps each year trying to work toward that ultimate program. So you do have some time. I would imagine you've got till sometime next year to have your program together.
I believe, you'd have to check with the regulatory division of water staff, but I believe that the newer MS4 is only for 3 years instead of the normal 5 years.
I've got a meeting with
Might I
Blue and Rich
suggest
tomorrow anyway.
that we get back on the agenda item?
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to sort out actually, was the impact.
I mean,
Oh.
there are streams all over New
Yeah.
Paltz. I have a question for Dave. Dave, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But at the last meeting, you and I, we had a long discussion about how this could be done, and performance bonds and all of those things. Is your firm capable of doing the project that is being proposed?
Sure. We design drainage all the time. It's one of our big pieces of the business.
Okay. I would like to move that we, one, accept the proposal as stated by, or estimated by Brenier and Larius, including accepting from Creo its willingness to offer supplies to us, hiring the firm of David Klauser and Associates to design.
Okay, would you mind splitting those into separate motions,
You want them split separately?
if you wouldn't mind?
I just have one question.
If you
That's
want.
right. Continue, please.
Is the money definite, or this
Yeah.
is we're applying
No, it's
for it?
definite.
Okay,
It's
all
not
right.
an
Well, because you had said something before that made me think that we had to wait for a response from the application.
No, we've been going on for a
I
while.
think
Okay.
I was
We've
in the
approved.
middle of
Yeah, it's
making
approved.
a motion,
I know. I have one more question.
not in the middle of a
And he
motion.
stopped you anyway.
And
Continue your motion.
and that cost, we hope not exceed, for all the design, including at a cost of $85,647.50, plus an estimate for Mr. Klauser for his services, and that will be the end of that motion. And then I want to make a motion about performance
Then
bonds.
one at a time.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Is
I'll
there a
make that
second to
motion.
that? Well, I'll second it.
So
For discussion,
yeah,
Brian, you first?
Well, I mean, I know Brennan and Arias usually come in lower than everyone else, but I mean, do we have to follow procurement or anything like that along the lines of architects or any of the consulting services?
That's why I said plus.
Actually, Sally, Dave didn't prepare this estimate, right?
Hmm?
Dave
I'm
didn't
aware
prepare
of
the
that.
estimate.
I'm aware of that, but I also have a very good memory from a very prolonged discussion on this project, which is why I moved the motion the way I did.
So have we followed all the?
We would have to reopen it for procurement policy if we hired Dave.
Okay.
Dave is not the village engineer, so we can't hire him.
Right. So
And we can't hire anyone else to design it but Behan, because Behan's our planning consultant. So we would have to go out and get 3 prices now, moving forward, if the motion went forward is passed.
we ended up naming them as our official consultant.
They have been named since 2006. It's so.
So I mean,
They
so
have never been used, and this is a separate project And that is why I am moving the motion to hire Mr. Paltz.
Dave, are you comfortable accepting work based on Rich Ruth's and John Behan's estimates and honoring that price they gave? And
Yeah,
and is your firm capable?
To tell you the truth.
And is your and I am too. I'm surprised because it's not how things are done. And is your firm capable of doing the design work that Behan would have done for this project, or were you referring to the engineering specifically?
Engineering.
Yeah. So we still need design.
Landscape architects, you really don't want engineers to be landscape architects. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
It's all streamlined. And then, I just may not be reading this right, I don't see sidewalks.
We wouldn't need any.
What do you mean?
One of the reasons this came in lower is because under this scenario we don't need to touch the storm drain that's underground or the existing sidewalk. Once the stream is diverted out of the culvert at the top of the park, we're just gonna fill that with quickcrete and leave it in place. The only sidewalk replacement we'll need is the couple of squares we needed to dig up when it was excavated.
I wish we had some kind of, visual of what that would look like.
So the actual.
That's what we would get with the design phase of it. We're just not at that phase of this the public works project
Yeah,
yet.
right. I didn't move that part.
So
the actual culvert is not. We're no longer tearing up all the sidewalk and moving it over.
Correct.
We're just putting in a culvert, I guess, closer inward to the center of the park.
Yeah, if you
The
look,
existing sidewalk will stay there.
Existing, right, except for the repairs. The
And
minor
so we
repairs,
still have to
yeah.
repair that piece of it, and that's,
Right,
okay.
yeah.
That's why it's going to be filled from the top down.
And this also includes, remember, the section from basically the Tricor entrance down to the pit, which is now kind of just paved and it's not even usable for parking. So that culvert, which is kind of grows into the tree, if you ever walk down there, see where it comes out into the pit behind Village
You
Hall.
wouldn't be able to drive there anymore.
Correct, because that pipe would be ripped out, and that section of the stream also would be daylighted and open. So it would
So it would
lengthen.
be a green area
Mhm.
from up until where that guardrail is, basically.
The-
I walk
yes,
up and down
yes,
that little
basically, yeah.
path of desire all the time.
Yeah,
so
right,
I
right where
know
right where the
exactly
stream
where-
comes out.
Okay.
Might I suggest you want to draw it out, just rough draft so people understand.
Is anyone confused? I mean, I can if you
If-
want.
Is everybody clear?
I'm not particularly clear on it, but I mean.
Yeah, I sent a drawing a few months ago, but it was old and I'd taken things out of it, so it was
Right, yeah, that's what I'm
redoing
saying.
it.
I feel like this is not exactly the same as
Well,
what we had.
It is the same. It's simple. All it is basically is at some point at the top of Peace Park where it hits where Hasbrook and Platica come together. At some point up in that area, the stream would come out into the park, flow through the park in some way, and since it's finite, I mean, it's just got to get downhill and hopefully probably avoid all the trees. So there's only a certain number of routes anyway. It would then go under. Stay underground for a short section under the access to Village Hall, and then be daylighted again from that section down to the edge of the Village Hall property, where it is then exposed until it goes underground. Then it is. So basically, just kind of that line, and so within that range, there's a lot that could be done based on the course. I mean, do we waterfall or what's kind of stone or plant? Then that's where the design comes in about what would fit.
I mean,
the site.
can it be like, what I'm imagining in terms of stormwater management is not just that this is going to catch runoff, but that this would be something that would help filter the water. And is that a piece of this at all, or is it just going to be open water? And that's
I don't know. I don't know if that's how streams behave. It depends on the plantings.
It depends on the soil,
Right.
a bit of it on the soil and the slope, on how much will infiltrate. Certainly some of it will.
Okay.
Mm. But it's also better than what we have now. I mean, better than keeping it in a pipe. Is also the thing to do. It is an improvement, even if it's a minor one.
So what happens right now if the pipe is it stops at one point and then it picks back up again? It's obviously not running water all the way through because there's a gap of it missing.
Right.
So the water now, I mean, it's just pooling up there. Or
No, it's flowing. If you stand, there's a storm drain right at the Tricor entrance, or by the bottom of the park, by the stop sign.
Right.
If you're walking towards Tricor, there's a storm drain. And you look down, and it's flowing constantly, and you can just see the flow. But it's also lower than it would be because it's also percolating out through the park. Because the bottom of the pipe basically rotted out, and it's just whatever's not seeping in is still flowing, but it's just flowing at a lower rate and reduced volume.
You're also running the risk, I think, of creating a sinkhole if we don't fix it, which is a really
Mm.
serious problem.
So obviously, if,
Well, it goes in the bottom.
right, it's eroding away. So if we just put
We
a
should have
piece
done
of
this.
if we put a piece of sidewalk over it, you know, like 10 years from now, we would have the same thing happen. Another,
You have to repair that.
you'd have a collapse.
You have to.
Eventually.
And that can be quickcrete.
Yeah.
That's a mixture of sand, kind of run-a-bank sand and concrete. Sets up very high.
But whatever, like if we replace it into another storm pipe, it would eventually just rot out and have to be replaced. I don't know if that was which point what you were making.
No, I mean my point was like, I mean, could we just leave it the way it is?
Oh,
but
I see.
eventually, that's just. I mean, it's going to erode away, and then
Right.
we would
Yeah,
have
the
we would have the
sinkhole
same
things.
problem
Right.
at some point down the road. So and then the other small part of this is that the 89,000 obviously doesn't cover landscape design and whatnot.
It does.
It does.
It's because it would be a subcontractor to Bernier and Larios was the arrangement that we had talked about. So it's included in Rich's, at the end there's some charges.
Furnishings.
It was a total of 7,500 total for the design, and that's folded into something in the,
That was Bayham, right?
yeah, Behan's price is folded into Bernier and Larios, where is it? But I have an email from Rich, there's no way I'm gonna find it right this second.
Okay.
That says where that was, because I had asked that question as well.
Oh, it's a total project. Everything all together is capped at 89,000.
This is not capped. It's and actually, well, that's because remember that's 5,000 short, so it's actually 84,000 because it's 25 from SUNY, not 20.
Okay.
And it's not a capped price. If you look at the top of the document, that's an opinion of probable cost.
Right.
It means it's an
Not-
estimate, which means that after the design is done, and and this is revised based on the design and the topographic survey we're having done. Then we'll get a revised, more precise opinion of probable cost, and then that will be used to prepare bid documents, and then it's just the standard,
Okay.
you know, it's just routine state process, the bid process.
So
So we need to get the design done first and start that. If this is something the board wants to do, because we've already got the topographic map in process, and
Right.
it'll be done soon, I think next week even. So once we have design and topography done, unless I'm forgetting something in how this process works, Dave, that's when we'll know a more tight number to bid, and we won't know the actual final cost until the bids come in,
Right.
because it depends on what we get back.
Sure.
And then we decide which one we want to give it to. So this is not like to the penny, this is how much, this is not like a bill for services.
Right.
This is
But please
estimate.
understand, what I did, and I think Jason knows what I did, was to accept the concept, give the concept approval, hire Dave Clauser as the engineer, and he will design the bid specs. Okay, and the design for our approval.
We can't do
And
that
then-
tonight, Sal.
Hmm?
We can't do that tonight, Sal. Dave is not the village engineer. We can't give him a $100,000 project without going through the procurement process.
So what we can do
We
is
are we're not giving him a $100,000 project. We are asking him to design something
He
and
says
design the
he
bid
can't
specs.
design it. His firm doesn't do that kind of work.
Yes, he does.
Landscape design.
The landscape.
No, I'm not interested in the landscape design.
Sally, you've lost me. You're talking about a
Okay.
different project now.
No, I'm not.
Which is the first
I
thing
am-
that has to be done. I guess
I
that's the
am
question.
asking, and my motion is to accept the concept approval based on preliminary thought of this breakdown. Accept with grace and thanks the college for the offer to supply $25,000 and to hire Dave Clauser as the design engineer to do the bid specs. That is what my motion is. And the landscape design will be a different motion if the board so entertains it.
Can we talk about? I'm sorry.
We hire landscape architects also
Hmm?
for projects. We hire landscape architects for projects also, if that needs to be in one package.
Does it? Or can it be separate?
Doesn't have to be in one package, certainly.
It can be separate, can it not?
Yeah.
Because we had talked earlier in the summer, when we talked about this whole project, of volunteer landscape design volunteers talking about, we talked about rocks, we talked about a lot of things that could be added on after the basic design is done. And we have an understanding of what the bid will be on the basic project. That's why I moved the motion the way I did, because...
Can I ask if you, and this is nothing against you, Dave, but makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Is there any reason for you to doubt Bernier and Narios' work or John Behan's work, that you would take a proposal drafted by our consultants and have someone else do it? Why would you
Dave
do you not trust...
does do engineering work for the village of New Paltz.
You didn't answer my question though. Is there a reason why you don't think Bernier and Narios can do this work?
I think they're doing an awful lot of sewer and water work for us now. I think that based on our discussion in the fall, and also my own working experience with Dave Klauser, that is why I moved it the way I did. He's a very good engineer.
No one's doubting
that. When you ask me why,
and he's still
it has nothing to say against Behan. I just like to work with people that.
Okay, but you're also, Sally, not hearing one important part, which is that we need a landscape architect for this project, as I've been saying since May, and we have one on contract. Dave says that his firm does not do that kind of work, though they do hire, as do other engineering firms. So
there's nothing.
Dave had also, that's what I was trying to remember. Dave had also just mentioned, if you remember, that you don't want an engineer to design something like this. So we need someone to design it. So it's one project. It's one motion. Honestly, I don't know what to do.
I mean,
this is a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Architecture, not that.
The engineer needs to collaborate with the.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I know, and that's what the plan is, or was, with.
When we talked about this long discussion,
Mm-hmm.
we said, and you said, and I think it was agreed upon, that the landscaping design aspect of this could be separated from the engineering design.
That was never, because it's not how it works. That was never, it wouldn't have been agreed upon. If you don't know what something's going to look like, you can't build it. That's kind of how it works. So KT, what's since if Sally's motion passes, we have to not take any action tonight and go back for the I'm sorry, let me finish.
Okay.
And go back to the procurement policy. I believe our next meeting is next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday.
Which is not enough time, which means we're into January before the board would ever even be able to make a decision on whether to hire Dave Klauser. What kind of time frame are you looking? Does that put us past window to get access to this money?
I don't think so. I think it's okay. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you just need to pass a motion that says, we accept this irrespective of these other details.
Right. So my question is okay, so let's say.
Or do it then. I would rather you do it.
I mean,
go on. Sorry. So. Well, I don't. You haven't expressly stated what you want us to do tonight, but what I'm getting is, so we have what constitutes an estimate here, but we don't have what the actual project will look like. The cost of doing a full-on scope of what the project is going to look like, is that what this cost is, or this is
that's the
this is what the project might look like.
This is an opinion of probable cost. It's an estimate. You can see what it's based on. But what happens is, we know what it's going to look like because, like I said at the beginning, we're not dealing with an infinite number of options here.
Right.
We already know roughly what we're going to end up with. It's just the details.
Okay.
But once we get more details, we'll have more accurate numbers. It may go down to 300 cubic yards or something instead of 5. And Dave could answer how tight these things are better than I can. I don't do them every day.
Okay.
But we're early, and we actually do this for everything. It's just this project is the only one that people are kind of looking at every sheet of paper for. We've gone through this with every water, sewer. We do these kinds of things for public works projects.
Sure.
Public
So like, let's say this was just a regular doing a sewer line.
Mm-hmm.
We say like, okay, we have to have a job done,
Mm-hmm.
and then do we put the estimate out the bid, or we have Bernier
We prepare a set of bid documents based on the final.
Okay, and
but we're not going to.
and
We're
what
the
is the
expense
cost?
of that.
What is the cost of doing that? $5,000 or something like that.
For a small project like this, it's probably about 15% of the cost. That's
15% of the cost of the full project.
right.
Okay, so how would we go outside of the procurement policy to have those documents set up? Like, how do we get Bernard and Larios to do this? How do we move forward on this without having a procurement policy?
I see. No, because the reorg that's why we named
There are
certain firms,
engineers.
village engineer, village attorney. Basically what we're saying when we pass those motions for any kind of consultant, like the Behan contract, even though it's old, 2006, is saying that the village board has agreed that we've already gone up through a public process of the vote, and we've vetted this firm, and we can just give them official work.
Okay.
And we can hire anyone else we choose anytime, but we have to go through more steps. That's all.
So now let's say Bernard and Larios do this cost estimate for us, and then some other engineering firm comes out and somehow jumps the cost down, whatever. So we have to take the lowest bid, right? I mean, isn't
Of what?
Of the cost of the actual job, like doing the work.
Yeah, when we hire the excavation firm or whatever.
Right.
We had to hire the lowest. I don't know what the actual word is. The lowest plausible bid. Most qualified, lowest responsible bidder.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I mean, if we can go ahead and.
So we'll know what the price is when we get the bids in. That's
Right.
the end result.
So as long as we're not violating our own policies by accepting this tonight, then we can go ahead and do that. And I think it'd be better just to maybe redo that motion and accept the money from SUNY and accept this as the estimate separately, and
But
then.
this is where I think I'm getting confused. We have an estimate from Bernier and
Yes.
Larios. But the proposal is to have Behan do it. Okay, Behan made a proposal dated July 31st.
That's out of date. That's what. No. You're right to be confused. This. No, you have
So,
no. I'm saying I see your
who
error
are
now.
we hiring?
Let me explain that. This earlier one was when the consultants knew almost nothing about the project. So this is a little bit high, and some of these we found had been duplicated in Rich's original opinion. So that's why the new opinion of cost from Rich Ruth is tighter,
Bernier
and it's just
and Larios.
is just right. And the design is a small part of it, 7,500, and that's not broken out as Behan planning because the thinking was it would be easiest for the process for an engineering firm to hire a landscape architect as a subcontractor rather than.
So Behan is in this proposal.
Behan is in this one already with Bernier and
Then
Larios.
why did we have a separate Behan proposal?
Because it was the letter that explained what the cost was to their portion of that. So I'm sorry if I didn't explain that well.
You didn't.
I apologize.
All right, that's accepted. I'm going to withdraw my motion for the moment.
Now I understand the confusion.
I would say so.
A little bit.
Can I ask a question before you do that? Well, we still have a motion on the
Okay.
floor. I just want to make sure I'm thinking apples and apples here.
That's what.
All right. So if you do it the conventional way, the estimate is 112,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that includes everything. I mean, for 112, do we have to do a landscape architect and all that?
Labor and materials. It's straightforward.
I mean, so there is no landscape
Right.
architect involved. So that we can count on, except for the cost of materials going up.
I guess
it's going to be 112.
Engineering for this sidewalk, I guess, might count, but probably not much.
So the alternative is to do what we estimate is going to be 89,000, which will include
84.
everything. 84,000.
84.
Which will include everything, but we don't know for sure if that's the final number because we have to hire the landscape architect to draw it out, and then we do bids and see what it is. But there's a sufficient room between the 84,000 and 112, so that presumably it'll come in below 112 we don't know, but probably it will. So that's the choice we're making.
Dave, in your experience, what you said you've worked with landscape architects, how at the end of the day, how flexible are these opinions of probable cost for things like this? How much variation do you see between the final bid price and what gets drafted?
I don't know what Bernier and Larios and what they use to do their estimate. I mean, you can use just the length of between the length in the park and come up with a ballpark estimate. I would expect there's some flexibility there. My guess is it would be higher than what the opinion of probable cost is. It depends on what you run into out there when you get going.
Right.
Well, you can also do it that you move it, that the project not exceed the cost.
Right.
And that's what I would do.
Then we can put that in the bid documents.
No.
You're not going to do the bid documents till after you have the landscape architect. He's going to give you your rendering or whatever and what it costs, and then you decide.
Right,
Do
and
we
then
go
you
out
get
for bid
cost
or not?
overruns and all those things.
All right.
As an example, I think in that estimate there's some rock removal, and they just roughly estimated how much rock would have to be removed. If there's more rock is expensive to remove. It's always better to go around it than remove it. But
So what you, Jason, are proposing is Bernier and Larry is being hired as the engineers. Bayhon is included in their proposal.
Was that by their choice or is that by our choice?
Yeah, they've worked with all of them, and honestly, it's a matter of BN having a history with the village and with New Paltz having done work here so much. But honestly, the two or three that we found earlier in the year, I mean, Dave and Kurt and Rich, all three said they heard good things about all the firms who we talked to Taconic and Hudson Pacific and BN.
I think Bayhon was the low bid of the three that we looked at.
Well, I thought we only did two.
All right.
does their design include? You were saying there was $7,000 there for the project.
$7,500.
The landscape architect.
Yep, that's what he's saying.
We can do it for that. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it would be 15% of the cost, just because it's a small project and you're going to run into things that you didn't expect.
Right. Well, I think there is a 15% in there from Bernier and Larios for some kind of contingencies. Yeah.
That's usually construction cost contingencies.
Then they've got a construction inspection too fit in there.
Jason, why don't you make the motion? Since
I'll
it was
move.
Well, it's like project. I mean, he's worked pretty hard on putting this together. So.
Well, let me ask this. Cause I feel sorry. I don't want to not hire you, Dave, but
I don't want to get into something that I know that I mean, the project, I believe, is not very well defined right now. There's going to take some time to figure out, get everybody involved in it and figure out what you really want, and then get into the design and get the landscape architect involved too. I don't think it can be done for that.
Really?
At $7,000. If they can do it, that's terrific.
What do you think? 15% of the project is a more reasonable estimation of that? What it would likely be?
They say they can do it though, Dave.
Well,
I'm gonna move that Bernier and Larios be hired to draw up the bid specs at a cost not to exceed, including the grant from the college, of $84,647.50, including the landscape. Did they just call themselves Bayhon?
well,
Bayhon
Bayhon
Associates?
Planning.
Okay.
I think it's Bayhon Planning LLC.
And
And then we accept the money, right? And then we accept the money.
Well,
I'll
can-
write a check. Just kidding.
So can you finish your motion so we can discuss
did.
it? Okay.
not to exceed.
Okay. So I guess I'll
And
second that, but I
it includes her
have a
grant and it
question.
includes Bayhon.
And it does. Thank you.
You're
I have one
welcome.
question now. What is not to exceed?
The cost
No,
of
I
the
know.
project.
I know the cost is, but this is an opinion of public cost going to be used with the design to come up with a new one to go out to bid. So
I think on my motion
is that
is
what?
clear that the bid that The project has to be designed, and the bid specs have to come back in project not to exceed $84,600.
I just want to make sure I understood that. Okay. Any other discussion?
I do have a question. What happens if we we're accepting the money, and what happens if then, I don't know, it's a much higher expense than we had imagined, or so I don't know, something happens that we decide not to do this. What happens to that money? That's like.
Well, they don't get involved
We're not
until the
gonna-
project is accepted.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
contingent on you
Doing the
doing it as.
So you're not just gonna give us a check tonight and then
No.
we're
And I don't,
I thought this was a commitment right here.
For a second, I don't even know how it's actually gonna work in terms of the buying of the materials. You saw the list of the materials, so I don't even know that it's gonna be a check. We might actually, show up with a dump truck. I don't know, but
Right.
the
But
dollar
that's-
amount
That comes
is 25,
after
and
the
it
bid
will
value
and
is
everything.
happen if you daylight the stream.
Oh, so it's
Okay.
not necessarily $25,000 in cash. It might be, hey, we'll help you with construction.
Yes,
No.
exactly.
It
Oh, I
actually has
thought
to
when you
be
were saying
materials.
supplies, I thought you meant like supplies.
No, you should have gotten a list.
What is
It's definitely not labor.
Like what? Like party supplies? What are you talking
I thought it was
like resources.
Yes,
Like how resources can be a variety of things. Funding or people.
I understood, and I made it part of my motion.
Okay.
That was my only question
No,
of
it's,
clarification because I don't want to. I don't know.
Right. It's materials such as drainage
No.
materials, native stone, structural fill, seed and plant materials, erosion control materials. That's why when I was talking before about how it's hard to help each other, one way that's an easier route is to provide materials. We don't
Right.
want to oversee your labor. We don't want to oversee your project.
Right, I got it.
We know that there's going to be considerable cost to this project.
You've got rocks and we need some.
But in answer
Okay,
to your
sweet.
question, if the bids came in too high, we're fine, because they're not in it yet.
Okay.
Got it.
So the money we're going to spend tonight, because we're hiring engineers and landscape architects. The cost of that we will not know until it comes out. Now let's say we decide the cost of the landscape architect / engineering to design what this final project will.
We're gonna get $7,500 worth of design.
$7,500 worth of design, and the engineering cost is
For which? The engineering cost to prepare the bid documents? Or
Yes. To like come up with like the final plan.
The final bid, I don't remember the bid document cost off the top. It's the same thing as I can't remember how much it costs to file a legal notice, just because we just do them routinely. But do you know how much it costs to prepare bid documents
I thought the design and the bid documents together were $7,000.
No, the bid documents are separate.
I think that's in the cost estimate.
It's all in there.
It's all in here.
We can also
Their
turn down the
design
bids too.
costs the whole shooting match.
But you should be able to get the contract without then you're going to be looking at inspection costs, and that's Blue could be doing this.
Well, this is all I know is this is no different. The only thing different about what I've presented from everything else we do about public works is the topic. It's the exact same process of opinion of estimates and bids that we do for everything. So I don't have it memorized here at the table. It's they're not rare, odd questions asked.
Their engineering and surveying fee is in, and they've allowed for an allowance as well. So I think the design, everything is in here, including doing documents.
It's not pointed out particularly, and that's what's interesting to me. So at the end of the day, let's say
That's why I said not to exceed that figure.
Right, but
the whole thing.
But what happens? Exactly. What happens if this?
There's no price tag on the bid documents. The whole point is we want this work done, and then they tell us how much it's going to cost.
Right.
And
so
then
it's
you
meaningless to
reject
have.
or accept the bid.
So what I'm saying is we're putting money tonight to just have the plans drawn up. So say not to exceed $84,000 doesn't really make sense.
And we would have to do this even if daylighting. If say there was no stream in that pipe, and it was just replacing the storm drain and startup, we'd have to do the exact same thing. We get an opinion of probable cost,
But that's
and then
a necessary thing.
yeah. Okay.
It's just like routine. That's
But
what
I'm
I'm
talking
saying,
about
you
the
know?
process is the same.
Well, the
No matter
difference
what.
would be apparently that you wouldn't need the landscape architect if you're just doing the convention.
It'd also be $25,000 more expensive too.
No, I understand. I mean, the process of what we're really committing ourselves to, if we move forward tonight, is that we're gonna pay to have the landscape architect
Design.
do the work, and the bids are gonna go out, and then after that, you can take them or not take them. If you
Right.
don't take them, then you don't get the money and you
Yeah,
have to do something
First
else.
thing you do is you get the design
Right.
and you approve it. Okay? Then the bid documents go out and you approve those if they are within the parameters you have set. The cost of the engineer to do the bid documents and all of that is included in his estimated cost.
In the 84,000.
So
Right,
all we're doing tonight is approving this document, hiring Bernier and Larius, which includes the Bayhon, accepting to be dispersed later at a cost not to exceed. That's how you protect yourself, because if you get a bid document and it's 20% higher than one of these, which I don't think is gonna happen,
As to this
then you reject it.
As to this particular deal, you get 3 bites at the apple. You hire somebody and they do the design, and if you never come to agreement on the design, you go no further.
You just don't go.
You agree on the design, then somebody does the bid documents and you pay for that. And if you don't like the bids, then you don't have to go any further.
Right.
And so
So
forth.
you're
So
saying
you got,
tonight-
you're doing 3 bites of the apple here. The only thing is, though, if you don't take the ultimate bite, then you're gonna have to fix the thing
Right.
anyway, and it's gonna
And-
cost more.
and
So
you pay
unless it's
And we
outrageously
paid
higher,
at
we're
each
probably gonna
bite.
do
We
it.
paid
Each
for each
step
bite.
of the way. That's why you don't want to just approve this cost. You want to say not to exceed.
The cost is completely irrelevant because who knows what it's going to be. The only cost that we should be worried about is what is the cost of putting this project together. The $7,500 that's not
That
clearly
becomes
stated in
their
this.
responsibility, because they're gonna do the bid documents, which you get then to reject or accept.
Right, but they're
But
still
we're already
getting their
paying them before that.
$7,500. Even if it's not to exceed, like they're still getting paid and we're still paying for that.
Mm.
Versus paying for a project that we know.
But there's a
would
whole-
happen.
Oh, you mean versus the $112,000?
Right, like
to
you
do
would
this
have the
as well.
engineering done and you would just blah 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 and it would go through.
Oh, I
and you would
see, I
know.
see what you're saying.
Let me ask one other question. If this is the procedure we use for many projects, a lot more expensive projects, I'm sure, than this, what's our experience been as far as the estimates and what we ultimately pay for it? Is it fairly close usually, or is it
It seems
double
to be.
in size?
It's hard to remember. I mean, bid
Yeah,
openings aren't exciting things.
No, I'm sure,
So-
but I mean, it's
Sometimes they
fairly
come under,
close,
sometimes
right?
they come under, sometimes they come over. I don't know, Dave would have more experience than I do.
Costs have been pretty stable for the last 2 to 3 years now in construction.
What
And
makes
if
this
we-
You can estimate it pretty closely.
I was hoping too, if we could get it done, I can't remember off the top of my head how many weeks you have to have for each step, but if the timing was right that we could be out to bid in January, that would be good for us, because, I mean, anything you can bid in the winter when all
But
the
that means the
construction
landscape
companies are,
design
especially the
don't
landscape,
have
they're
to be
really
quick.
hungry, so if we can lock people in for a spring project in the winter, we'll get a better price now than if we went to bid on this in August when everyone's busy. Just something in general, like, it's good to get projects going this time of year.
You can hold bids for 45 days after they're open, unless they agree to hang in there longer. I mean, usually you try to bid it when it's time, you know, not more than 45 days before they really are going to start it.
Based on what Jason just said, should we put a time expectation on when the landscape design the project design will be to this board for review?
Should always do that
Good thing.
with engineers, yeah.
Gonna amend my motion. What date do you want?
Motion hasn't even been seconded. Motion was never seconded.
Oh.
Jason second.
Jason
What's
seconded.
something reasonable then?
Kate said no, but.
In your, with
No, I'm
landscape architects?
disagreeing with you actually.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm wrong, sorry.
Don't forget the holiday.
Did you say you had the total survey started?
It'll be done next week.
So that's a week and a half off of it there. There's probably 6 weeks. You should have the design and the bid specs as
The
long
end
as,
of
you
Middle
can
of
really
February.
take a look at the design and make sure it's what you want, and then bid specs doesn't really take.
Can I ask a question on the design? Does the landscape architect discuss with the board what they're thinking of, and then they design it, or they design it and we look at it for the first time and say,
No, you should be able to see what they're up to when they're, say, 50%, you know, they need to have a good concept of it, but you need to see it early, because I'm sure you're going to want to make some changes to it.
I would like that
And
to
for
come
the
to the
landscape
entire
design
board.
to be completed by the workshop in February, that's 6 weeks.
Is it? Yeah.
Well, is the holiday.
Oh, right.
Okay, by the workshop meeting in February, which is the second meeting in February,
would be the third Wednesday in February?
whatever date that is.
That's not
2013.
unreasonable, certainly for that project.
So we're looking at early January to have something to the board? Assuming the 50% mark
For the
is somewhere
board's
around.
approval.
Sounds good to me.
So I said that, I'll
Okay,
accept
so
still.
it was amended,
Second.
Jason accepted the amendment.
Any other questions for anyone? Nothing?
But you do expect to do the work in 2013?
To begin the design work
It
then,
does
yeah.
need to be by December 2013. I didn't think we were thinking at that far horizon,
Yeah.
but now, since you're talking.
So
Has to be
a start
completed by
date,
then?
completed by end of 2013?
Well, I think that we might be able to, we have to spend.
Oh, I think
the funds
we'll
have to
be
be
done.
spent, the $25,000 has to be spent.
I don't think
by
that's an
December.
issue.
Then that's not an issue.
Deliver the
No,
materials on the
Since you were
first
just
day.
talking
I was
timelines-
confused. I thought you were saying 2012. I got confused for a second. No. Well, it's a spring.
Next year.
It's not. It's fast
my
once it
understanding
starts.
was gonna happen in the spring.
No, it's not a lot once it gets started.
I mean, once the board sees the design in February, then it's pretty quick moving to get bid documents done, bids awarded. If you're gonna put performance bonds in, you can do that. If you can, no change work orders on the design, you can do that. But we have to see the design first.
Yeah.
It's probably 3 weeks of construction, if they really
Yeah.
get on it.
We've covered our bases, right? Okay.
All right. No more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much. And thank you all for coming.
A 5-minute
Did we, want to take,
Yeah,
well,
thank
actually,
you.
you know what, we need, because they need to unpack this stuff anyway.
We
Yep.
got some
That's
people we
right.
have to interview.
And we'll
here.
let
Yeah,
another
and
donate,
then,
pack up, and then
Elizabeth and Hector were gonna stay, but maybe Hector, Elizabeth and Kirk could arm wrestle over who goes first, or
yeah, flip it.
rock, paper, scissors, something. Would you like to be interviewed first, or did you want to stay for the B3 rezoning discussion? Well, it's your
almost
choice.
10 o'clock. I imagine that.
Yeah, that's good.
We should at
But
least
smoke.
interview first, and then you can say if you'd like to.
That's not a bad idea, yeah.
Jason, give one I just told before. Yeah.
Which I mean,
Huh?
Give one I told before.
I know I'm gonna.
Yeah? Oh, yeah, I know.
About planting trees along tributaries and things, we're already doing, so we're way ahead of the game.
Riparian barriers.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention before, our latest Creole brief was about food insecurity in Ulster County, and there's lots of data
About what?
about
Food
New Paltz.
insecurity.
We have
Food
municipal
insecurity.
level, census tract level.
Oh, nice, good.
School district level, so.
You have an
Would
extra
you be
copy
willing
of
to part with that copy? Ah!
I got it first.
It's not a professional
Did
copy,
not.
I will leave it. It
We
is
spoke at the
online
same
right
time.
on our homepage.
I will
want
let
that.
Sally have it because I'm more tech savvy, even though I'm still
Katie,
not tech savvy.
Katie,
No, you can have
What
it,
about
but just
this?
know that
Okay.
I stapled it. We don't even have the professional
That's
copy
okay.
yet, but.
I'll forgive you. It's the content I'm interested in.
Me too.
I'm interested in this.
But I'll look at it online.
In the what?
I'll read
Staples.
it and get it to you, Ariana.
Oh, it's okay. I'll read it online. Don't worry, Sally.
It's right on
Thank
our
you.
homepage.
But thanks for coming out, Katie, and
I
thank
was
you
just
for
teasing about
and
who
thank
got
you for
there
reaching out for the Peace Park project too, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And
for all the
thank-
work.
And Jerry too is very
Thank
excited
you.
about
Thank
that, so
Jerry
I'm really thrilled
for-
to hear that it was a unanimous vote.
I will send him an email thanking him on behalf of the board, but will you thank him personally?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, I move to
Virginia
appoint
Cat.
Elizabeth Harshaw to the planning board for to
Second.
fill the remainder of Linda Wells' unexpired term. Seconded. Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome aboard. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Bye.
Fulfilling the rest of my term goes until when?
Sorry?
2022.
No.
Katie can confirm. I think her term is up, but
Her
we'll confirm
term
it.
expired.
In 2012, so I would believe.
It's a full 5-year
It's
term.
a 5-year term, effective.
Immediately.
2007, May 31st, 2017.
Yeah. So I hope you've met Kurt Lavala. He can orient you a little bit to the planning board.
Perhaps I'm in the office one day. Kurt.
Okay.
And will you let Kelly know so she can be included on?
I will alert
Yeah,
Kelly,
bring me
we
up to
will order a
speed
name
and-
tag, we will order a name tag, I will call Maurice, I will send it all off tomorrow.
Excellent.
And Kurt will be in touch about the two of you sitting down so he can walk you through some of the planning process, some of the things that you might
right downstairs in the building
be useful for the first
Thank
meeting.
you. Love to meet with you before our next meeting.
And you're welcome to stay. We're going to talk about a rezoning that will be coming before the planning board shortly.
Executive session.
No, after that we have.
No, your
we're skipping
reward
that.
was not having traveled.
So Kurt's going to get because Kurt already presented to the board a few meetings ago the first draft of the B3. Tonight he's going to have just walk us through the changes that were made rather than walk us through the whole law again.
Yes.
And the thinking, and Kurt can tell you the thinking, and then on the next steps as well.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. This is, of course, I've removed the track changes in as much as it's now a much different draft section of the zoning code than it was even from the first proposed iteration. So what remains, of course, is the formatting. This is section 212-13, and the major changes are, and this is, I took this direction from the discussion among the board last time we discussed this, which again is presently the B3, and the name, while it has not been formally settled upon by the village board, I've been using, my working name for it has been the North Chestnut Street Gateway District. Thank you. One of the things that has been changed since you last saw it is that there was talk about reasonably optimizing density. The floor area ratio is now proposed at 3, and of course what that means
What page are you at?
Yes. This is...
or section, I guess.
I'm sorry, it's actually, yes, 212-13... 212-13-7 bulk requirements, and then subsection B, lowercase b.
So it's on the second page for us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's maximum floor area ratio, of course, is a planning term to describe building coverage on the site. So let's say you had a one-story building covering an entire site. That would be a floor area ratio of 1. Here we're proposing to allow up to construction up to 4 stories and 45 feet, which was also amended to be more realistic of what a 4-story building.
I'm sorry, tell me where we are again.
Sorry, I'm
page,
sorry.
the second page.
I don't have page numbers.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
item
actually,
7.
Does that require a modification?
Number 7?
Current planning, which
It
is
has A in
45
bulk
feet?
requirements.
Yes, this is for this district.
Thank you,
it is,
sorry.
No
it
worries.
is higher
So he's
than
one above that.
currently allowed in any district.
Okay, so
6.
you ought to point that out.
Yes, of course. Again, to make 4 stories feasible, 45 feet, which is more reasonable than 40 given the utilities that go into construction. And also here, I don't necessarily expect pitched roofs and architectural features like some of our more historic structures, because we're likely to be looking for sustainable construction practices that would include a flat roof. And that means something like we saw in the PowerPoint presentation, which could be a living roof, and or recreation, communal recreation on the roofs for the residents of these mixed-use buildings. So again, that changes. It's 3 now. In 2007, Bean Associates was asked to at least provide an approximate floor area ratio. That was 1.5. So we are doubling the floor area ratio. Again, we have 4 stories to work with, so we're not. So please don't picture a site being entirely covered by a building. Yes.
I have a question about are we in 7? That was what B was.
That is 7. Yeah.
For A, I don't like the may be. I think it should be shall be. I think
Okay.
that we should be very stringent with our environmental requirements. I hope that the board agrees with me, and I think any parking facility, I mean, you saw that thing that I had sent you with
Yes.
that super green parking lot. I think any kind of parking lot should be based on that. Like the campus is doing it, we gotta be doing it.
I think more and more that the use of it and the maintenance over time and its durability, I think more and more has become established. So
Okay.
we're not really, I don't think, in a precarious position to do that.
We just had a great presentation all about it from
Yes. There are
Emily.
several
So
examples, right, for the walking and for vehicular traffic.
yeah.
And I might, on the same note, I might add that what I've tried to do, I talked about giving you a comparison of different sustainable construction standards, those official standards, those organizations that use those. I'd like to include that as a separate part of the overall recodification and not just apply to one district, even though we're likely to see it utilized for this district because we're talking about redevelopment.
And would that include Ariana's point about pervious versus impervious pavement, or is that something that should be included district by district?
It could be either way, and I would say it would be covered by whatever system of standards we embrace. That would be covered. What this would do, Mayor, is it would actually state that we're identifying parking as something where we want to see pervious, as opposed to the potential a la carte choices of a developer to accumulate points towards a certification. Right. So that's the distinction. And
I have a question about what you were saying about the general codification, and if we're like, so things that would fall under that we would want to be something that is, sweeping and not by zone, should that be what we do first?
Well, I think
in terms of what we're going to be passing, because otherwise we would have to specify in this, like say we were going to pass this first, and which is obviously the path that we are on right now, and then we were going to do that and remove certain things from the specific zone to have it in more of an overall thing, and then we pass this and this is no longer under moratoria, then you know what I'm saying?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
I do. And I do concisely. I think that before the moratorium is lifted, that at the same time, it's reasonable to expect that the board can expect to have from me the information upon which to make a decision about which system of sustainable building standards they want. And then we would lift the moratorium when that's in place. So that would need to take.
Because we could always extend the moratorium if we find we need an additional 3 months or 6 months.
We can
at some point, right?
Or
lift it early.
Or we may not want the moratorium depending upon
Right.
what the county recommends.
Exactly.
It's true. But in any case, that would need. It really should be done at the same time. No development, in particular in this zone, should be undertaken without the board passing on that question of what standards are we going to set for sustainable construction practices. Another thing that was changed was we did reduce the requirement for parking down to a half a parking space per bedroom. So of course it varies with the number of bedrooms in an individual dwelling.
A half a parking space?
A half a parking space per bedroom.
No, wait. If I have one bedroom, I have at least one person.
You can only have half a car.
I was just gonna ask.
Right.
Only half the people
Which do
residing
I get,
there
the engine end or
can have a car.
the other end?
You could get one of those roller skate cars.
Actually, well, some of the
And this is only the requirement.
Well,
People
yes.
can do more than that. This would be the minimum. Right?
That's right. That's correct. It's written as the minimum, but we all know that we are seeking to encourage, in as much as possible, in conjunction with market forces. And I think a lot of renters and buyers of units in this district will probably be attuned to the same things that we are. In other words, in terms of not providing so much more pavement for parking than is necessary. So what would happen is that there would be some competition potentially within individual building projects for parking. In fact, it could be marketed as an amenity which might simply cost a little bit more than an apartment that doesn't come with that, but perhaps that's
I
our
like that. Pay
intentions.
more for parking.
Yes, it would actually be broken down as an amenity and could be marketed just that way.
Right.
And if that's what we seek to do, this would accomplish it. But you're right; it's a fraction
per bedroom, so a one-bedroom apartment would only
So
require.
that means if Ariana gets an apartment and I get an apartment, she has a half, I have a half, I have to buy her half.
I don't
She
drive.
doesn't have a car.
Well, I think it would come down
Not a
to.
problem. We're all good, Sally. We can be good together.
I don't know.
There's a limited number of spaces. The
Right.
parking spaces are a limited amenity by our own code. Therefore, a developer could choose to build more parking, which we would hope would be not outside, but perhaps if not beneath, because that may not be possible because of the water table, but perhaps enclosed. And again, once again, as we saw a green roof on a parking lot at SUNY Orange in New Paltz, again, that's also possible. So it conceals it aesthetically and also enhances the environmental score.
May I ask you a professional question? A dumb question from me. Is this considered good planning model?
Yes, and in particular for communities like ours, this is a village with a high density. So when they talk about smart growth communities, or sometimes they're called transit-oriented communities, most of those, of course, have commuter railroads. We just happen to have A, a lot of people who live and work within the village, and B, we also have excellent bus service. Traditionally, it's trains, but buses are also. So this is smart growth planning, and we have the right pattern of development intensity for it. Yeah.
So two points, I guess. The first being, so on the residential streets, maybe like Church might be a good example. There's a high density of housing, very limited parking for the number of people living there. So then you have the cars flooded with streets flooded with cars. So I mean, what we're trying to do, I guess, is by eliminating all the spots and there's nowhere to park, and then these people just can't have cars.
No, actually, part of what the village should do proactively, in addition to adopting new zoning for this area, is the ongoing processes, plural processes of considering parking in the village and considering what regulations we have now. So that should be part of it. I'd suggest that, for example, in the case of the district we're considering now in North Chestnut, there's no doubt that I have yet to see the county lot, park and ride lot, full much. So it's underutilized. And of course I believe that we can set rules for that, use parking permits. There may be parking permit stickers, but that's all part of this. The way we handle parking is very important to make a success out of all the rezonings we do.
Oh, that's a very good point. And something I guess the caveat to that is, I read an interesting article about the city of Boston and how there are people now who want to develop on the outskirts of Boston, and the public transportation is kind of going bankrupt in Boston, the cost of labor and everything else. So what they're doing is finding developers who want to develop on the outskirts and then have them put in a trolley or contribute to bus service or however that happens to be. So, and apparently this is the way things were done, back in the day. You wanted you wanted a place where you're close to jobs, so you want to have apartments that are close to the city. Well, eventually you can't get any closer to these jobs, so you have to start building out. Mm-hmm. So in order to have those places be good places to live, you say, oh, well, you'll be just a trolley ride away from downtown.
Exactly.
And then the developer builds the trolley system, and everyone gets to benefit from it.
That's a very accurate.
And then the cars came.
We should send that to the town planning board in Wilmerite.
Well, actually,
that article. Send it to me.
Okay.
You could draw a comparison. To right. We are not.
I just did.
Accommodating. We're not being overly accommodating of it. We're treating it as a limited resource, and also we just heard, of course, all about impervious surface, about stormwater. And of course how flooding, which is the specter of which is a lot more than it has been. I think even engineers are even reconsidering how often 100-year storms may happen, which is it's a 1% per year.
We've had 4 in the last 6 years.
Yeah. and it's hard to believe, but yes, in our time, they're reconsidering some of these long-standing assumptions and initiatives.
I'm sorry, Kurt. Brian's comment reminded me of something I'd read somewhere about the mayor of Bogota in Colombia inventing, he called it bus rapid transit. Because, mass transit is usually like light rail. You want the trolley or the subway line, but the tracks are expensive. So he just kind of took things and he built like a subway platform, but it was just buses, like linked, and they had their own dedicated lane, so they were going like 90 miles an hour, like a train, because they'd slow down for the bus stop, and you buy your ticket on the platform, and the bus would open, you just get on, like a subway. And so I know we can't really do that until we get some really nice federal funding, but it just seems to be nice to think about, like linking all the old little hamlets, Stone Ridge, High Falls, Rosendale, with something like that. But on a smaller scale, we've got, and when we think about the B3, we've got this enormously wide road, and the weird speed limits, so that you basically start speeding because the road gets wider and it feels safe to do it right when you shouldn't, and everyone gets tickets right there by stewards. But if you narrow in terms of that, we don't need shoulders like that. If we pass a zone like this and everything gets built out every parcel, so that seems like actually an interesting part to all this. I mean, are we looking at, do we narrow the road and have really wide sidewalks or angles, or is this up to the developer? Do we
I don't know where you're talking exactly. I don't know where you're talking about the road being so wide. I mean, there's no.
Once you go past stores and that bridge,
Tributary 13, it
widens out.
Maybe you don't notice it because you're not behind the wheel.
There are some portions that are.
Yeah.
But there's, there's cyclists who are.
Right. But we could do bike lanes, we could do bus lanes. That's what I'm saying. We have lots of options because we have lots of width. So it just is that.
But then what happens when you hit the part where the culvert is?
You'll have to slow down your bicycle and look.
Well,
no, I mean if there's a trolley or something.
This is my point. Is that one section isn't enough for a bus rapid transit, but we're always people bring up the sidewalks in nowhere because it's sections at a time get built.
That culvert is an area that Bike Ped really has been pushing DOT to expand that area and make it more bikeable. And Judy Meade was promised, in fact, that was going to happen, and it did not. And there have been requests made to us, not officially, but conversation about, well, can the village do something like this? So I mean, if we were to have what you're talking about, that would be a perfect time for us to expand that and work on that, and maybe work with the DOT to do that in order to fit a trolley and bike lanes.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because obviously
solar trolley.
Some of these things wouldn't be practical for us, but others would. And is this the right time to think about that, or is that does this go in the silo of the village-wide streetscape design standards or something like that?
It leads into really the last changes. In other words, the Bike Ped committee with whom I met this past Monday, they accurately noted that there's nothing specific in this zone about bicycle standards. Again, I want that to be a standalone section of the code, and it must be in place, very similar to sustainable building practices. It really must be in place for us to accomplish all of our objectives here at the same time that building is again permitted in this district or any other that we change. So that should be universal. In other words, the type of bike rack, the specifications, the area set aside for it. So the Bike Ped committee astutely noted that was not in here, and it must be in our zoning code before we have significant building projects.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure what they're gonna do, and you stayed at the meeting after I left because I left Bike Ped to go to the Park Point public hearing. But one of the things they talked about was including a conversation about our zoning in their next meeting and making a list of things that are important to bikes and bicycles and pedestrians, and that committee in particular, for us to consider in everything that we do. And I obviously welcome that.
Yes, and I essentially promised to be very much aware of the needs for, and I think that you've probably heard me speak about it, even when it wasn't the direct topic we were talking about. It comes around to safety and security and of travel by pedestrians and bicycles, and also being allowed to, at a certain age, to let your kids bike ride and walk in the village without having to worry more than you should about their safety at intersections and the like.
Exactly. And if we want to encourage the connectivity of these areas and have it be that people are, moving around from the Main Street area to the edge of the village, basically, we have to create those connections.
Yeah, but the specifics of North Chestnut, I think that there will be time. I mean, I think New Paltz is very important, not only in terms of the regional bus lines that serve our bus station, but also the Ulster County transit system. I think New Paltz is very important to that. I think we all know that from the surveys and the ridership, that we're very important to that. So that there's potential there, but no, I don't think we can resolve what exactly we can fit within the right of way tonight. Right. But I don't believe that I think we'll be pleased with what we accomplish in the short term and the long term in it. What I'd like to do, if the board generally likes what they see in terms of the changes, is that at the very beginning of the year, I would attempt to get as many people as possible from the Downtown Business Association together. Yes, and I figure that as soon after the new year, I think a new year begins, and I think that people are back focusing on business after the holiday season, and that if the board finds this to be acceptable for that purpose, it's then right for the Downtown Business Association to be able to tell me what they think of these proposed regulations.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Well, in the meantime, does it make sense, I don't know if this is jumping the gun or not, but does it make sense to send this to the village and county planning board simultaneously, since we have 45 days to wait for their comments?
You're right.
Or would we have to, obviously if there's many changes, we might have to do that over again, but if we had at least the first comments from all three, we could maybe incorporate all of them into another draft and see whether we need to resubmit it at that point, or is that just too clumsy a way to do it?
No, actually, I think it would be reasonable because the county may have on any rezoning in any community in Ulster County, the county planning board and the county planning department are likely to have some substantial comments. We may, of course, amend it. So beginning this process, I don't think any county planning department in the state would discourage the notion of the possibility of a second or resubmittal in order to.
So what you're suggesting is parallel.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
If like the next time in January when this comes up, we have the DBA, county, and village planning board.
On the bottom, what you said about it, creating and establishing a uniform code for bicycles and
sustainable construction.
Yeah, and put that at the bottom because they'll probably wonder why it's not in.
Yes, especially since I did at first place it in. And it went along, also some things that the mayor mentioned with regard to the same idea, there were some things removed regarding utilities, which are again common to throughout all of our zoning districts. I will make a point of that, and of course the Bike Ped Committee asked me on Monday night directly about it, so they were right on point on it.
Yeah, but I'm sure the county is aware of these things, and they'd be curious to know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Good.
So I will, I guess, make the motion to refer this draft local law to the county and village planning boards for their comment.
And to review with the DBA or whatever.
If it needs to go in the motion, it was just.
Okay. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
But all those things will go concurrently.
I'm sorry, what was the motion?
To refer the draft, this revised draft to the county and county and village planning boards for their comments?
At the same time that the.
Because it takes 45 days to get them back.
With the community.
So they'll all have comments and
Well-
we'll do it one more time.
I mean, but if he's meeting with the DBA and then there's changes, we're gonna have to resubmit it now.
Well, the thinking is that
Changes
it takes,
from all of them.
we might get comments from all of them, and it takes 45 days to hear back from the county planning board. So he will have met with the DBA before we get the county planning board comments back. So we will have had all three, so that we can look at those at our meeting in January and compare it and see what, and kind of come up with a third draft of this based on those comments.
Oh, I see, okay.
Kind of getting that clock started.
It'll move it faster.
Yeah, rather than sequentially.
That's correct. And
So that's a motion on the table. So all in favor again?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And thank you for the diligence, Kurt.
Certainly, my pleasure. And,
When will we have the standardized, not that I want to rush you, I'm just curious, when will that be done?
Those two universal items,
Yeah.
yes. I've begun the comparison of the sets of standards for construction, and I find that they're quite involved. And I thought that as a planner, a generalist municipal planner. I knew a good amount about them. I'm finding out.
They're very detailed.
Yeah, very much so.
There's a lot more to know.
You know,
Yes.
it's interesting because at the town planning board meeting on Monday, one of the biggest requests from the town planning board to the Wilmerite developers is for a matrix of LEED and National Green Building Standard and maybe a couple of other things, and they have essentially said that that is not possible to come up with that kind of matrix. I don't believe that is true. They said, oh, it's going to be a lot of work, and you know, the town planning board basically made the demand that they still want some kind of comparison.
So that was the resolution.
So hopefully they will get something from them, and possibly we can use it as well, and it will be something that's done by a whole team of people with all varying expertise. I don't know if it will come into being or not, but you know, I did find one comparison, but it was from the it's actually what the campus has been using and showing to people. It's from the National Association of Home Builders, which with minimal research I learned is a build pack, and political action committee, and a lobbyist group, and of course they're going to go for what is the best for the builders, not best for necessarily the environment. So I wouldn't say that I quite trust their comparison chart, but there is one, and I'm sure, and there are plenty of articles, but none of them are a matrix, you know?
And it's true that I have no preconceived notions before I give you my recommendations on which sets of standards. And in fact, of course, I won't give you just a recommendation. There'll be a discussion that we'll have to make that decision. And along with the bike ped, that would also with the help, again, the bike ped committee has done so much work on those standards that they already have done much of the work that you might want to incorporate in a site plan for bicycle and pedestrian. So therefore, I don't have to do that from scratch. I have very qualified people to help me from that committee. Yeah.
I have a question, which is...
Would you like to give it to Elizabeth? I think that's your current one.
Sure.
That way she'd have it to just look at and review. And
yes.
Then when you two get together, she could ask questions.
Yes. Thank you. You're welcome.
Just a kind of an off-the-wall question. Do we have any shot in redoing our codes that somehow to encourage or be able to implement putting the utilities underground? Or is that just so expensive that it's not worth considering?
I'd hate to say that it's too. I'm afraid that may be the case because, of course, after this most recent storm Sandy, there's been figures thrown out about $40 billion.
Seven figures per block.
Yeah.
For one side of the street.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah. Now in some cases, some streetscaping grants have actually provided funds for that. Unfortunately, we may be experiencing a time period right now where they're not funding those, but some streetscaping and complete streets programs have included that. Those are some very fortunate communities.
It depends on where too. I mean, if it's Main Street where we got to check in through the sidewalk, versus a street where there's soft ground right next to the pavement and you can just dig in.
That's why it's perfect when streetscaping programs are undertaken, because you're going to redo the sidewalks anyway and then reconfigure them. So
we looked into that for the South Industrial Corridor a few years back, and it was
because
still expensive.
The district that you're talking about here, I would think it wouldn't be easy. It would be easier than to say do it down Main Street.
Well, the good news,
the sewer system and the water lines that are on the B3 corridor are on the west side of the road, right underneath the utilities. So you couldn't bury them right above the sewer and the water lines.
Well,
so it poses a challenge to get them on the other side of the road, because you couldn't, if you have this force mains and pressure mains of the water system.
Right. Stuart, there is another factor to add, and that is that new development is often required almost universally to bury utility lines, especially if they're running new lines. In the case of existing lines, that could be a separate question, but new development, such as even new suburban subdivisions where they're running new utility lines, those are underground, and that's a cost of development. So I think there's room for for another
We don't
prospect.
really have much opportunity for that other than perhaps the land we just annexed.
Well, it doesn't have to be entirely a greenfield. It would be perhaps an assessment of what is the current status. In other words, it doesn't have to be a greenfield out in a more rural portion of the community. It could be in the same way that we're going to require streetscaping standards for new development of all types, even without a grant, even without the funds that we once had for that purpose. So new development does offer that prospect, and I suppose that feasibility and cost benefit should be looked at the same time.
We just don't have that many opportunities for new development of large scale within the village. And if you didn't have large scale, it may not.
Well, you're right.
Might not be cost effective.
You're right. A very small application, such as reuse of a building, a change of use, a site plan. You're right. That could be. But in terms of new development, especially the type that we're seeking to accommodate here, we're seeking to accommodate dense development, mixed use. So again, I think during that process that a project were to be reviewed, feasibility and cost benefit should be looked at. If one thing I can offer you in an answer is that it's not too late and it's not unfeasible. It needs to be looked at perhaps on a project by project basis in a corridor.
May I also give Elizabeth your rationale for
Yes.
what you're recommending?
Thank you.
That's the memo that goes with it.
Thank you.
And then when you visit with me, there'll be a
Ignore
whole
the
bunch of
back
other
list,
materials.
it's recycled paper, so that's
Did we move
part
to
of my
finish?
husband's book manuscript.
Any other questions for Kurt?
Yeah, thank you.
No? Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying so late.
Thank you all. No problem.
Great job as always.
Yes, actually, it was good.
I'd like to make a motion to add something super quick as a discussion. The parking spots on Grove Street. Would anyone second that?
For what?
The spaces that we moved to remove on September 27th.
We do the law.
Yeah, we can.
You've made a motion, but now it's gotta be.
For discussion. To have a brief discussion.
Would anything? Well, let's resolve that. Brian would like to add something to the agenda. Is anyone else interested?
I'll second it.
Okay.
So you can discuss
So let's.
whether you want to do it or not.
The Grove Street.
Let's
Grove
finish
Street.
just a couple other things.
I'll talk about reports also.
Is there anyone who objects to the consensus agenda? I didn't hear anything about doing this.
No, I think it's a good idea. I like that.
Because anyone who wants to request can pull it off. It makes one motion out of 5. So
If you wanna pull something off.
just email
You
me or
say it
Katie
at
before the
any time.
meeting, and we'll.
But what if you've asked for something to be on and it's not on?
That's not the
another.
question.
That's another matter. Yeah.
That's a different issue.
That's what Stuart's memo in the beginning was about.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we had dealt with this.
All right. I'm not. You know what? Then screw it. I'm not gonna even explain it. I'm not gonna take up any time. I'd rather not.
The consensus agenda is totally different than the idea about trustees being able to put matters on the agenda. Those are two
This is a
separate.
matter of
Look,
pulling off?
It's right there.
No,
It's explained right there on the agenda itself. I wrote
In
it
other
out.
words, it's you
Why
put
didn't you have that on there?
a whole variety of
It's not on mine.
I don't know why.
It's Stuart's thing. Can he explain it?
In other words, some organizations they take routine matters and they put it on a consent agenda and it's sent to the members ahead of time. And for the most part, they're the things that are not controversial and they're going to be done. And so you have one motion and approve the consent agenda. However, if you don't want it to be on the consent agenda, you can tell the mayor, the clerk, that you want it pulled off because you want to talk about it. Otherwise, you can save
It's just
a lot of
handled
time.
in one motion.
Yeah. So
Right.
these are all the things that we all know ahead of time. We're just gonna do this and
You know
why
what?
get it over.
See, it wasn't on my.
Yeah. I don't need an early version. That's it.
And just as a point of order, it was on the agenda that was sent to each of you in the email. It was not, I did not put it because it's a sub-note about trustee Glenn and I didn't put it on the agenda the general population saw because I felt if you wanted to discuss it, you would discuss it at the table. And I didn't want to put anyone in an awkward position, so there were actually 2 drafts of the agenda, one that you saw with the extra notes and one that the general population saw. What you have in your hand is the general population agenda. That's why you don't see
Might
it
I
right
suggest we not do that in the future, that we have everything
Okay.
That's fine.
Because
Okay.
I think that's, first of all, more work for you, and secondly, one can really get confused.
So,
That's fine with me.
all right. So if anyone, if no one else objects to using this tool, I'll just do this from now on. Let me know.
Mhm.
So I'll move to adopt the consensus agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'll move the bills and claims.
Wait. Hold on. I moved to open an item for discussion. It was seconded.
Mhm.
And then there was no vote and we didn't have a discussion. And now we just are doing another motion. So we probably should finish the motion that's on the table before we go any further. Am I wrong in that?
Oh, I thought you said, could you open it? And I said, fine with me.
Yeah, so.
Do you want to move it formally?
No, let's just, I just made a motion and it's due in
Oh.
second. So can we just discuss
Okay.
it very briefly? Okay.
Okay.
What's going on with these parking spots?
I don't know. You have to ask Blue.
You're the manager of all the departments.
I don't have all of their tasks memorized, Brian.
Okay, well, the board approved to have these spots removed
Yeah.
on September 27th.
Mm-hmm.
What has
And
happened in department
every-
head meetings that
every-
this has not happened?
Every
We mentioned.
single meeting we've brought it up, and you say, "Oh, like I'm gonna go out there with spray paint," and then like, okay, so we don't.
Well, isn't there a question now about whether we have the authority to do that?
No.
That's what Sally brought up just a second
No,
ago.
that was my point. I think, Brian, that, now, yes, September should be taken care of, but I think we have to amend the zone, the code, the village code, just like we have to do.
We have a list of all the parking spaces everywhere in the village that we have
We
to
have-
remove them from.
Well, we have stop signs and,
Right, but there's no list of parking spaces in the village code.
well, there's a list of what streets you can park on and where.
Yeah.
That's what I find so absurd.
Right,
I mean,
each individual spot isn't listed. so
And don't we have a
most
meeting with
remove
Blue and Nick
spots.
about that
yeah,
report soon?
would you?
I'm not trying to bust chops. I'm not trying to pick a fight and bust chops.
Blue
I
has
just
requested a meeting to talk about the parking plan.
okay.
Okay.
But this was
Again.
this was a separate
May I
motion
bring
we
that
made.
up to find out where we are, because I want to know where the
When is
handicap
that meeting,
parking
Sally?
spaces are. That we did have a law and did pass, and they're not in yet.
Wait, what?
Do you remember we did the handicap parking, and we
Oh right, yes.
had a hearing on it, and we
Right.
did the whole thing.
Right.
One on Plattekill, Main,
Yes.
Lower Main.
Right.
Okay, they're not there yet.
Well, notice today as well that none of the department heads have gotten the minutes from September 12th on. So that we've
It's
got
a
a
problem.
train wreck. We've got a collision, not a collision course.
But it's like
Well, not log jam. Yeah, traffic jam. You know that. Yeah, because that's how they usually get the list of everything.
So they haven't seen.
So
the,
when the
they haven't-
departments don't see the minutes that because we haven't approved them
Yeah.
or
They
they're
haven't
sent
seen
out
the
the draft,
proposed minutes, the draft minutes. They see them now.
they get them when we get them.
I'd have to go back to the email to
Yeah.
give you a specific answer.
So there was a log jam. Things I know because things are piled up.
Okay,
and-
but in light of knowing that,
yeah.
couldn't we have talked about this in department head meetings or things like that? I mean, I'm not invited or included on any of these
Nor
things.
should you be,
So,
yeah.
nor should I be, right? So I have no ability to say this, but if you're not saying these things in the meeting, then that's a problem, Jason.
Grove Street.
Well, I mean, you guys can say whatever you'd like here, but I mean, you all know it's not a secret that I'm not really
In the office?
interested in taking your abuse or accusations live on camera and being blindsided all the time. Yeah, you guys have questions. I answer all your emails.
I'm not trying to.
No,
Jason, if I
I'm
could
not trying
call
to be
you, this maybe could be something
Send me-
solved.
This is not appropriate.
When would you like us to chat?
It's not. This is not appropriate, Ariana.
When are you and I going to talk? I can't call you. When I call the mayor's office, I can't leave a message
Excuse
because
me.
your mailbox is full. When
It
would
was
you
my
like to talk?
understanding that while I was away, unhappy things happened. Now, I think we have to all be civil with each other. There is a problem. It's a twofold problem. We are having a parking meeting, so I'm gonna bring it up.
Okay.
But it is, and I think the mayor has already addressed it, it is essential that we have the minutes in a timely way, because quite frankly, I can't remember what I did in September. So
Which
I
is
don't
exactly
know.
the mess I got into with the TIC because I didn't
But
have
that-
any minutes.
They're two different issues, and I think we can't mix apples and oranges, and I don't think that we should just get upset with each other. Let's just not be a part of the problem, let's be a part of the solution, and I think we have the solution. We're gonna have the minutes in a timely fashion. They will be with us, what was it, 5 days? 5 days after the meeting?
No, they're going to be to us the noon
I know
on
you
Friday
said
after the
time.
meeting.
Okay.
Noon on Friday after the meeting.
So the mayor, in his administrative capacity, has given a direction. That direction, I'm sure, will be carried out, and if it isn't, then it is the mayor's responsibility to find out why. But we did have a mix-up, there's no doubt about it, and let's just say the problem will be solved, and if it isn't, we'll deal with it.
So
if it becomes another problem.
Can I rely on you to relay the message to Blue and get him out there?
Yeah, we're gonna go through the whole thing, so that will be a part
We're gonna go through the
of
whole
it.
parking, and
Okay.
I will
Yeah.
find out whether this has to have a change in the code or not.
Okay.
Okay.
There were some
And if it
concerns
does-
among the DPW about various
Are you two
provisions.
gonna meet with them about the parking plan? I'm not. Are you two? Gonna
No,
meet
I
with
want
them?
you
That's
to
what.
come too.
Okay.
Well, that's what
I'd
Blue
like to do
requested.
that.
So
Yeah,
I
but-
should not be there, or she should, or
No,
who should not be there.
Katie, who was invited?
I was requested that Blue, Nick, Jason, Sally, and Nancy be at this meeting.
Okay,
That was the request that came from
Okay, but that's because for the Blue part, I met with Blue because Ariana couldn't. But she's part of the parking plan, and I think she should definitely be
That's
in.
fine. I'll not go. You guys can handle it.
There wasn't a statement of excluding or including anybody. That was the list that
We
was
have to
given
notice
to me, I'm sure.
No, we don't.
3 of us.
Three is quorum. I mean,
We can figure this out. We don't have to figure it out here right this second.
And could you, is it possible to invite Joe, because a lot of this is gonna be
legal.
Let's talk about it after.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
All right.
yes, we can have Joe there for anything we want, but
I'll move the bills and claims.
that was already
That was on
moved.
the- that
That's
was
what
on
the
the-
consent
that's
agenda
the
is.
consent agenda.
You,
And we did this too.
no, we haven't voted on it because now we discussed Brian.
Right,
So,
so now-
So I guess you have a motion. You should probably
Yeah,
because we
withdraw
never voted on it.
or-
So the other motion's on the table to approve the consent agenda. Is there a
And
second
is
for
there a
that?
second?
Stuart
I
seconded.
seconded it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we do have the minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes, or can I make that one motion?
The only point I'll make, there were a few things that were not English things, and I gave the suggestions to the clerk, to typos and a few things like that. So other than that, I don't have any questions about the minutes, and I would vote for all of them.
Yeah,
Well, I can't vote on the November minutes, so whatever way you want to do it.
So I'll move to adopt all the minutes but November. How's that?
Well, I had one thing.
I'll second it, and then you can
There we
go.
go.
I'm sorry, Jason, you're moving to accept
All minutes except for November. So this will be one Sally votes on. The next motion she won't.
There was one meeting where I'm trying to find it now. I didn't make a note of it when I was reviewing. I don't know why. Where we went to executive session, and before it I was there, and then when we voted for executive session I was absent, and then when we come back out I'm there again. So is it possible I was in the bathroom?
Possibly you're in the bathroom.
when they voted? With
I think
Absent
it's
for the
because
vote.
you're a magician.
That
You
reminds me of
disappeared.
the book I'm reading.
Reappeared.
The Father's Club. The ghost appears and then he disappears.
The ghost appears and disappears.
If I've made a factual error, I will happily amend.
Well, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah,
where
I just
was
can't
when
recall
everyone voted,
that part back.
for that part. So I mean I don't know. I don't know what to say of it. I didn't know if you remembered or.
I could go back to the handwritten notes.
And
I'd be happy to.
I'm going to amend the minutes to
I'll find it for you.
include in the approved document the changes that Trustee Glenn introduced and gave to you to make sure that they're in.
So you'd like that as a friendly amendment to Jason? Okay.
Does it matter for the outcome of the minutes, Brian? Or is it just
Unless she wants to change it. It was the 10-10 minutes. So
oh, you're just looking that up.
Make a note of it. Yeah.
Okay. So is that all the discussion?
Otherwise, it's fine.
So all in favor?
Aye.
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 So now I'll move to adopt all the minutes from November.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
And that's it, I believe, unless the only executive session we had were the interviews. The other thing we discussed last week will be on for the next agenda.
What's that?
I'll tell you later. I'll email everyone later.
Executive session?
Yeah.
Or?
We don't need to talk about it tonight. I'll email everyone an update on things.
Or are we?
May I just ask
are
one
we?
question?
Are we gonna have this up here?
The monthly reports.
Yeah, well, I sent an email to all departments telling them no exceptions, that the monthly reports need to be emailed out.
To everybody?
Close of business 5 o'clock Friday, and then for the monthly 5 o'clock, close of business on the first Friday
Are
of
we
the month.
doing both monthly and weekly?
2 are weekly, 2 are monthly. Blue and Nancy.
Building
they're
department
not-
has both
there's
weekly
not enough-
and monthly.
Okay.
There's not enough turnover in the finance department, for example,
Right,
to
so,
justify a
so
weekly
it
report.
depends on the department,
Depends on the
whether
department.
it's
I would
weekly or
like-
monthly.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like weekly reports from the DPW. I feel like there's no reason why we can't have more regular updates. Because I only recall seeing one from the
No, there haven't been any. I went back.
Huh, I'll double check.
And
I'll make sure
mean,
like I don't get
well-
them and you guys
well,
aren't copied for some reason or something.
I mean, are we
No,
talking
I
about this
don't-
out here Saturday? I don't think this is. I think
He's out in the department.
I'm sorry, wait, what are we?
I would like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters and yes.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to serve.
Yeah, thank